Solomon was not only the wealthiest man of his time. He was a master of manifestation who understood the universal laws that govern the creation of wealth. His true legacy was not in the temples he built or the gold he accumulated, but in the hidden principles that turned his mind into a magnet for prosperity. For centuries, these teachings were interpreted as religious metaphors, ancient stories without practical application. But the truth is far more powerful. Solomon mastered what modern science is only beginning to understand: the relationship between consciousness, vibrational frequency, and the manifestation of physical reality. In this revolutionary audiobook, you will discover how the principles that made Solomon legendary are in fact neuroscientific and quantum laws disguised as ancient wisdom. You will learn to reprogram your subconscious using the same techniques that transformed a young prince into an icon of absolute abundance. Prepare to unlock the code that turns thoughts into wealth, intention into manifestation, and potential into tangible prosperity. This is not just another book about money. It is a manual of consciousness transformation that changes everything. Chapter 1, Solomon's Awakening. When consciousness chooses wealth, there's a moment that changes everything. A single instant where the entire trajectory of your life pivots, where the version of you that struggles with scarcity dissolves, and a new identity emerges, one that naturally attracts abundance. For Solomon, that moment came not in a temple, not in a throne room, but in a dream that was more real than any waking experience he'd ever had. You know that moment, too, don't you? That fleeting instant when you glimpse a different possibility for your life, when you sense there's something more available to you than what you've been experiencing. Most people dismiss it. They wake up, shake it off, and return to the familiar patterns of limitation. Solomon did something different. He made a choice that rewrote his destiny, and more importantly, rewrote the very structure of his consciousness. And here's what you need to understand right now, before we go any further. That same choice is available to you in this very moment. The ancient texts tell us that God appeared to Solomon in a dream and said, "Ask for whatever you want me to give you." Stop right there. Let that sink in. Imagine standing at that crossroads, being offered anything your heart desires. What would you choose? Most people, if they're honest with themselves, would ask for money, security, power, or perhaps love. These are the things our survival-oriented brains are programmed to seek. But Solomon, in that pivotal moment of consciousness, asked for something that seemed, on the surface, to have nothing to do with wealth. He asked for wisdom. Now, before you think this is just another morality tale about choosing noble virtues over material wealth, let me tell you what was really happening in that moment. Solomon wasn't just being virtuous or humble. He was demonstrating a fundamental principle of reality creation that quantum physics is only now beginning to validate. Consciousness is the primary creative force in the universe. Solomon understood something that most people never grasp in their entire lifetime. He understood that you don't chase abundance. You become the consciousness that naturally creates it. Think about this for a moment. Every billionaire, every person who has created extraordinary wealth, every individual who seems to effortlessly manifest opportunities and resources, they all share one common characteristic. It's not intelligence, though many are smart. It's not hard work, though many work hard. It's not even luck, though it often appears that way from the outside. What they share is a particular state of consciousness, a specific way of perceiving reality and their place in it. They vibrate at the frequency of abundance. They think from abundance, not toward it. And this is precisely what Solomon accessed in that transformative moment. Neuroscience now shows us that every thought you think, Every emotion you feel, every belief you hold, creates a cascade of neurochemical reactions in your brain. These chemicals become the signature of your personality, and your personality creates your personal reality. If you wake up every morning thinking the same thoughts about money that you thought yesterday, if you replay the same emotional patterns of worry, anxiety, or fear about your finances, if you perceive the world through the lens of scarcity, your brain literally becomes hardwired for limitation. You're not attracting poverty because the universe is against you. You're creating it because your consciousness is programmed for it. Solomon's question, "Give me wisdom," was actually a sophisticated reprogramming command. It was a quantum leap in consciousness. By asking for wisdom rather than wealth, he was essentially telling the universe, "I want to understand how reality works. I want to know the operating system behind manifestation. I want to master the code." And here's where it gets really interesting. The text tells us that God was so pleased with this request that Solomon received not only wisdom, but also wealth, honor, and long life, things he didn't even ask for. Why? Because once you elevate your consciousness to a certain level, abundance becomes a natural byproduct, not something you have to chase or struggle for. Let me share with you what happened to a woman named Sarah who attended one of our workshops. Sarah had been struggling financially for years. She'd tried everything: vision boards, affirmations, working multiple jobs, reading every success book she could find. Nothing changed. Her bank account remained stubbornly empty, and opportunities seemed to pass her by. During the workshop, we explored this concept of consciousness preceding manifestation, and something clicked for Sarah. She realized she'd been approaching wealth from a state of desperation and lack. Every affirmation she spoke, every visualization she attempted, was saturated with the energy of, "I don't have this yet, and I need it desperately." Sarah made a decision similar to Solomon's. She stopped asking for money and started asking for wisdom about money. She stopped trying to force abundance and started studying the consciousness of abundance. She spent time each evening before sleep, entering into a meditative state where she asked a simple question: "Show me how wealthy people think. Let me understand the mindset of prosperity." Within 3 months, her entire financial situation had transformed, not through lottery winnings or sudden inheritance, but through a series of opportunities, ideas, and connections that seemed to materialize out of nowhere. Her consciousness had changed, and her reality shifted to match. This is not magical thinking. This is how the brain works. Your brain is essentially a quantum computer that processes about 400 billion bits of information per second, but your conscious mind can only handle about 2,000 bits. What determines which 2,000 bits you perceive? Your beliefs, your expectations, your habitual patterns of thought. If your subconscious is programmed with beliefs like, "Money is hard to come by," "I'm not good with finances," or "wealthy people are greedy," your brain will literally filter out information and opportunities that contradict these beliefs. You'll walk past the very chances that could change your life, because your consciousness isn't calibrated to recognize them. Solomon's awakening wasn't about acquiring something external. It was about activating something internal. The wealth he manifested wasn't created from nothing. It was always there in the quantum field of possibilities, waiting for a consciousness sophisticated enough to collapse those possibilities into physical reality. This is what quantum physics teaches us. Before observation, before consciousness interacts with the field, all possibilities exist simultaneously in a state of superposition. Your observation, your consciousness, collapses the wave function and determines which reality manifests. When you go to sleep tonight, your brain doesn't simply shut down. It enters different states of consciousness, moving through beta, alpha, theta, and delta brainwave patterns. In those deeper states, particularly in theta, your subconscious mind becomes highly receptive to new programming. This is why the content you consume before sleep is so crucial. If you fall asleep worrying about bills, replaying financial failures, or reinforcing beliefs about scarcity, you're essentially programming your subconscious to create more of the same. But if you fall asleep in a state of expanded consciousness, asking questions like Solomon did, exploring the feeling of abundance, rehearsing the emotions of financial freedom, you're reprogramming your operating system for prosperity. The ancient mystics knew this. They called it different names in different traditions, but they all understood the same principle. Consciousness shapes reality. The Hermetic texts say, as above, so below, as within, so without. The Buddhist teachings speak of mind as the forerunner of all states. The Christian scriptures tell us, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. Solomon embodied this wisdom. He didn't just believe in prosperity. He didn't just want wealth. He became the consciousness of wisdom, and wealth was the inevitable result. Here's what I want you to understand as you prepare for sleep tonight. You are not your bank account. You are not your current circumstances. You are not your past financial failures or your present struggle. You are consciousness, and consciousness is the most powerful creative force in the universe. Every moment, including this one, you have the opportunity to make Solomon's choice. You can continue trying to chase wealth from a state of lack, or you can elevate your consciousness and let wealth flow to you naturally. The question God asked Solomon is the same question the universe is asking you right now. What do you truly want? And before you answer money or security or success, go deeper. What do you really want? Do you want to understand how abundance works? Do you want to master the consciousness that creates wealth? Do you want to evolve beyond the limited identity that struggles with scarcity? Because if you choose wisdom, if you choose understanding, if you choose to elevate your consciousness, everything else will follow. Not because you're being rewarded for being virtuous, but because you'll have accessed the very mechanism through which reality is created. Solomon's awakening was the moment he stopped being a victim of circumstance and became a creator of reality. He stopped waiting for wealth to come to him and started generating it from within his consciousness. He stopped hoping for prosperity and started embodying it. This is your invitation to the same awakening. Tonight, as you drift into sleep, as your brain waves slow and your subconscious becomes receptive, you have the opportunity to ask Solomon's question, not as a prayer to some external deity, but as a command to your own infinite consciousness. Ask for wisdom, ask to understand, ask to see reality as it truly is, not as your limited programming has convinced you it must be. Your consciousness is choosing your reality right now. Every thought is a vote. Every emotion is a signal. Every belief is the instruction to the quantum field. Solomon chose in that dream, and his choice echoed through thousands of years of history. What will you choose? Will you choose from fear or from wisdom? Will you choose from lack or from understanding? Will you choose to remain the person who chases wealth, or will you choose to become the consciousness that creates it? The answer you give, not with your words, but with your state of being, will determine everything that follows. This is your moment of awakening. This is when consciousness chooses wealth. Not the wealth you pursue, but the wealth you become. Chapter 2. The frequency of abundance, vibrating in the same tune as wealth. Everything in the universe is vibrating. Right now, as you read these words, as you breathe, as your heart beats, You are not a solid object sitting still. You are a dynamic field of energy oscillating at specific frequency. The chair beneath you, the walls around you, the phone in your hand, they're all vibrating. Even what appears solid to your eyes is actually 9% empty space filled with particles moving at incredible speeds. This isn't mystical poetry. This is quantum physics. This is the foundation of reality itself. And here's what changes everything. Your thoughts, your emotions, your beliefs, they all have frequencies too. And those frequencies are either attracting wealth into your life or repelling it with mathematical precision. Solomon understood this principle in ways that would take humanity thousands of years to rediscover through science. When he built his kingdom, when he attracted the wealth of nations, when gold flowed to him like rivers to the sea, he wasn't working harder than everyone else. He wasn't smarter than every other king. He was vibrating at a different frequency. He had tuned his entire being, his consciousness, his emotional state, his expectations, to the exact frequency of abundance. And the universe, which is nothing more than a responsive field of infinite possibilities, had no choice but to match his signal with corresponding experiences. Let me tell you about the most important discovery neuroscience has made in the last decade. Your brain produces measurable electromagnetic fields. Every thought generates an electrical impulse. Every emotion creates a magnetic field. When you combine thought and emotion, you create a state of being that broadcasts a signal into the quantum field. This signal is your personal frequency, your unique vibration. And just like a radio station broadcasting on a specific frequency, you can only receive what matches the signal you're sending out. If you're broadcasting on the frequency of fear, scarcity, and limitation, you cannot receive the experiences that exist on the frequency of abundance, opportunity, and wealth. It's not possible. It's not that the universe is punishing you. It's that you're tuned to the wrong station. Think about the last time you felt truly abundant. Not when you got paid or received money, but when you felt genuinely wealthy, when you felt that everything was working out, when you experienced that deep sense of security and possibility. What did that feel like in your body? Where did you feel it? How did your breathing change? What was the quality of your thoughts? That feeling, that state of being, that's the frequency of abundance. And here's what most people never realize. You don't need money to access that frequency. You need that frequency to access money. Solomon didn't become wealthy and then feel abundant. He felt abundant and then became wealthy. This is the secret that's been hidden in plain sight throughout history. You've been taught backwards. You've been conditioned to believe that you'll feel successful when you achieve success, that you'll feel wealthy when you have money, that you'll feel secure when your circumstances change. But quantum physics and neuroscience both confirm the same truth. Your emotional state creates your reality, not the other way around. Your feelings are the language your subconscious mind uses to communicate with the quantum field. When you feel abundant, before you have evidence of abundance, you're speaking the language of creation itself. I want you to understand something crucial about how your brain works. Your brain is designed to be a recording and playback device. By the time you're 35 years old, 95% of who you are is a memorized set of behaviors, emotional reactions, unconscious habits, hardwired attitudes, beliefs, and perceptions that function like a computer program. You wake up on the same side of the bed, follow the same routine, think the same thoughts, feel the same emotions, and make the same choices. Your body has literally been conditioned into being your mind. And if those memorized emotions include fear about money, anxiety about bills, stress about survival, then every single day you're activating the same neural networks, releasing the same stress hormones, and broadcasting the same frequency of scarcity into the field. Here's where it gets really interesting. When you're in a state of stress, when you're feeling fear or anxiety or worry about money, your brain operates primarily from the beta brainwave state. In beta, you're focused on the material world, on problems, on survival. Your perception narrows. You become hyper-focused on everything that's wrong. And in this state, the creative centers of your brain literally shut down. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for intention, imagination, and manifesting, goes offline. You cannot create from a state of stress. You can only react, defend, and survive. And survival is a very different frequency than abundance. Solomon knew that to maintain his wealth, to continue attracting prosperity, he had to maintain a specific state of consciousness. The text tells us he would rise early, before the demands of the kingdom, before the concerns of the day. He would enter into a state we now understand as meditation, where his brain waves slowed from beta to alpha to theta. In these deeper states, he wasn't just relaxing, he was changing his frequency. He was moving from survival consciousness to creation consciousness. He was tuning his entire being to the station of abundance. Let me share what happened to Marcus, an entrepreneur who came to understand this principle at a critical moment. Marcus had built a successful business, but he'd hit a plateau. No matter what strategies he tried, no matter how many hours he worked, his revenue remained stubbornly stuck. He was stressed, anxious, constantly worried about competition, about losing clients, about making payroll. One day, utterly exhausted, he decided to stop fighting. He went for a walk in nature. No phone, no agenda, just walking. As he walked, he noticed something shift in his body. The tension began to release. His breathing deepened. He started feeling grateful for what he had, instead of anxious about what he lacked. For the first time in months, he felt genuinely good. He felt abundant. He didn't know it then, but his frequency had just changed. Within 2 weeks, 3 things happened that transformed Marcus's business. A former client called out of nowhere with a major contract. A partnership opportunity appeared that doubled his market reach, and an idea came to him for a new service that his industry desperately needed. Marcus hadn't changed his strategy. He hadn't worked harder. He'd changed his frequency, and the universe responded with matching opportunities. The quantum field had been listening to his signal the whole time, and when that signal shifted from fear to abundance, the field reorganized itself around his new vibration. This is how energy works. Like attracts like. This isn't just a nice metaphor or wishful thinking. It's a fundamental principle of physics. Coherent frequencies resonate and amplify each other. When you're vibrating at the frequency of abundance, you literally become magnetic to people, opportunities, ideas, and resources that match that vibration. But here's the challenge. You cannot fake frequency. Your subconscious mind knows the truth. You can say affirmations all day long. You can visualize wealth. You can think positive thoughts. But if underneath all of that, you're feeling fear, if your body is conditioned to anxiety about money, if your heart is closed and contracted, you're broadcasting the frequency of lack, and that's what you'll receive. So how do you change your frequency? How do you shift from the vibration of scarcity to the vibration of abundance? It starts with understanding that your body is the unconscious mind. Your body has been conditioned to feel certain ways. If you've spent years feeling stressed about money, your body is addicted to those stress hormones. Cortisol, adrenaline, these chemicals become familiar. They become your normal, and your body will actually crave situations that produce those chemicals. This is why you keep creating the same financial struggles. Your body is chemically addicted to the feeling of scarcity. Breaking this addiction requires you to feel a new emotion consistently enough that your body begins to recognize it as the new normal. You have to teach your body what abundance feels like before abundance appears in your life. This is the work Solomon did. Every morning in that quiet space before the kingdom awakened, he wasn't just thinking about wealth, he was feeling it. He was generating the emotions of gratitude, satisfaction, joy, security, and possibility. He was bathing his cells in the chemistry of abundance, and over time, his body became the living embodiment of prosperity consciousness. Neuroscience shows us that when you practice feeling abundant, when you generate those elevated emotions independent of circumstances, you're literally creating new neural pathways. You're signaling new genes. You're instructing your cells to reorganize. Your heart begins to beat in a coherent rhythm. Your brain moves into a state where the analytical mind relaxes and the creative mind activates. In this state, you're no longer thinking from your past. You're thinking from your future. You're no longer defined by your circumstance. You're creating new circumstances from a field of infinite possibilities. The ancient mystics called this state enlightenment, but there's nothing mystical about it. It's a measurable change in your electromagnetic field. When your heart and brain are coherent, when you're feeling genuine elevated emotions, you produce a field that can be measured up to 3 meters away from your body. This field carries information. It broadcasts your frequency. And other people, other energy systems, the quantum field itself, they all respond to this broadcast. This is why some people seem to effortlessly attract opportunities. This is why certain individuals walk into a room and the energy shifts. They're broadcasting a powerful, coherent frequency, and the field responds. Solomon's kingdom wasn't built on military might alone. It was built on frequency. Rulers, merchants, queens from distant lands, they were all attracted to something they couldn't quite name. They felt compelled to bring their gold, their gifts, their allegiance. They were responding to the frequency of abundance that Solomon embodied. He had become a living magnet, and the entire known world oriented itself around his vibration. You have the same capacity. Your electromagnetic field is just as real, just as powerful. The question is, what frequency are you broadcasting? When you wake up in the morning, before you check your phone, before you look at your bank account, before you start thinking about your problems, what's your first feeling? Is it anxiety? Is it stress? Is it that familiar contraction in your chest that says, not enough? Or is it gratitude? Is it possibility? Is it that sense of anticipation that something wonderful is about to happen? Because that first feeling, that first frequency you tune into, it sets the tone for your entire day. It tells the quantum field what kind of experiences to send your way. Here's a practice Solomon used, translated into modern understanding. Before he slept, he would review his day not from the perspective of what went wrong, but from the perspective of abundance. He would feel gratitude for the wisdom he'd gained, for the challenges that strengthened him, for the wealth that flowed through his kingdom. He understood that the last thoughts and feelings before sleep program the subconscious mind for the next day. He was essentially setting his frequency dial to abundance before entering the highly receptive theta state of sleep. His subconscious would then work throughout the night, reorganizing, creating new neural connections, preparing him to perceive and receive abundance the next day. You can do this tonight as you prepare for sleep. Instead of replaying your financial worries, instead of rehearsing your problems, take a few moments to tune in to the frequency of abundance. You don't need to visualize specific amounts of money or particular possessions. Just feel the feeling of being prosperous. Feel what it's like to live without financial anxiety. Feel the expansiveness in your chest the ease in your shoulders, the smile that naturally comes when you feel truly secure and provided for. Breathe into that feeling. Let it fill your body. Let every cell begin to vibrate at this new frequency. And here's what will start to happen. Your subconscious mind, which controls 95% of your behavior, will begin to notice opportunities that were always there but invisible to you before. You'll start making different choices, not through willpower but naturally, because your frequency has changed. You'll find yourself in the right place at the right time. Conversations will lead to connections. Ideas will spark into inspired action. This isn't magic. This is your nervous system responding to a new signal. This is your brain creating new possibilities because you've changed the frequency you're broadcasting. Solomon didn't hope for abundance. He didn't wish for wealth. He didn't work himself into exhaustion chasing prosperity. He tuned himself to the frequency of abundance and let the universe deliver matching experiences. He understood what quantum physics now proves. Consciousness and energy create the nature of reality. When you change your frequency, you change your reality. Not because reality shifts to accommodate you, but because you finally become capable of perceiving and receiving what was always available. The wealth you seek is already here, vibrating at a specific frequency. Your job isn't to create it. Your job is to match its vibration. And the moment you do, the moment your frequency aligns with the frequency of abundance, manifestation becomes inevitable. It's not a question of if. It's only a question of when you'll finally tune in. Chapter 3. The Inner Temple. Building the Mental Architecture of Prosperity. Solomon spent 7 years building the temple in Jerusalem. 7 years of meticulous planning, gathering the finest materials, employing the most skilled craftsmen from across the known world. The structure was magnificent, covered in gold, adorned with carved cherubim, filled with the presence of something greater than itself. But here's what most people miss when they read this story. Solomon wasn't just building a physical structure. He was demonstrating a principle that would echo through millennia. The external temple was a perfect reflection of the internal work he had already done. Before a single stone was laid, before the first piece of cedar was cut, Solomon had built something far more important. He had constructed the architecture of prosperity consciousness in his own mind. You see, your mind is like a building. Right now, as you hear these words, you're living in a mental structure that was built years ago, maybe decades ago. The foundation was laid in childhood when you first heard messages about money. The walls went up through your experiences, through watching your parents interact with finances, through every success and failure you've encountered. The roof was completed by the beliefs you adopted about what's possible for someone like you. And just like any building, if the architecture is flawed, if the foundation is weak, if the structure is built on sand instead of rock, it doesn't matter how much you try to decorate it or renovate it. It will never support the weight of true abundance. Most people are trying to manifest wealth while living in a mental structure designed for scarcity. They're trying to store abundance in a consciousness built to accommodate lack. It's like trying to fill a palace with treasure while living in a hut. The structure simply cannot contain what you're trying to create. This is why so many people who suddenly come into money, lottery winners, athletes with massive contracts, people who inherit wealth, they lose it all within a few years. Their external circumstances change, but their internal architecture remained the same. The mental structure collapsed under the weight of wealth it was never designed to hold. Solomon understood that before you can have lasting prosperity, you must build the mental infrastructure to support it. You must renovate, reconstruct, and in some cases completely demolish the old architecture and build something entirely new. This isn't comfortable work. Demolition never is. But it's absolutely necessary. You cannot build a temple of abundance on the foundation of poverty consciousness. The two cannot coexist in the same space. Let me explain how your brain creates this architecture. Every thought you think creates a neural pathway. Think that thought repeatedly, and the pathway becomes stronger, more automatic. These pathways cluster together into networks, and these networks form your beliefs about reality, your beliefs about money, about your worth, about what's possible for you. They're all neural networks that have been strengthened through repetition. And here's the critical part. These networks don't just influence your thoughts. They literally filter your perception of reality. They determine what you see, what you notice, what opportunities you recognize, and what possibilities you consider achievable. If your neural architecture is built around beliefs like, money doesn't grow on trees, you have to work hard for every dollar, rich people are greedy, or I'm just not good with money, then your brain will filter reality through these structures. You'll literally be blind to opportunities that contradict these beliefs. Your reticular activating system, the part of your brain that determines what information gets through to your conscious awareness, will screen out anything that doesn't match your existing architecture. You could walk past the very opportunity that would change your life, and you wouldn't even see it because your mental structure isn't built to recognize it. I witnessed this principle in action with a woman named Diana who attended one of our intensive workshops. Diana was a talented graphic designer who could never seem to break past a certain income level. She'd been self-employed for 15 years, working with small businesses, charging modest rates, always feeling like she was one client away from financial disaster. When we began examining her mental architecture, when we started exploring the foundational beliefs that structured her financial reality, she discovered something shocking. At age 7, she'd heard her father, during a heated argument with her mother, shout, "We're not made of money, we're just regular people." That single statement, absorbed by her young brain in a moment of high emotion, had become a load-bearing wall in her mental architecture. She had unconsciously defined herself as just a regular person who couldn't expect extraordinary financial success. Once Diana saw this belief, once she recognized that it was just a piece of outdated architecture, not an immutable truth about reality, she could begin the renovation process. But here's what's crucial to understand. She couldn't just think different thoughts or say different affirmations. That would be like painting over a cracked foundation. The structure itself had to change. She had to do the neurological work of actually dismantling that old neural network and building a new one. And the only way to do that is through consistent practice of thinking, feeling, and acting from a new paradigm until the new architecture becomes stronger than the old one. Solomon's temple took 7 years to build. The number 7 in ancient wisdom traditions represents completion, wholeness, a full cycle of transformation. The message is clear. Building new mental architecture takes time. It requires patience, consistency, and dedication. You're not just changing your mind. You're changing your brain. You're not just adopting new beliefs. You're creating new neural structures that will support an entirely different level of abundance than you've ever experienced before. Think about the blueprint of your current mental architecture. What are the foundational beliefs? What were the earliest messages you received about money, success, and your own worthiness? These early imprints are powerful because they were absorbed before you had the cognitive ability to question them. They went straight into your subconscious as unquestionable facts about how reality works. And now, decades later, they're still functioning as the operating system that runs your financial life. You've built your entire experience of abundance or lack on top of these foundational programs. The beautiful thing about understanding neuroplasticity, about recognizing that your brain can change at any age, is realizing that you're not stuck with faulty architecture. You can rebuild, you can renovate, you can, like Solomon, construct something magnificent where there was once limitation. But it starts with honest assessment. You have to be willing to look at your current mental structure without judgment and ask, is this architecture capable of supporting the abundance I desire? Is this foundation solid enough to hold the weight of prosperity? Are these beliefs, these neural networks, these habitual patterns of thought, are they serving my highest vision, or are they keeping me trapped in limitation? Solomon didn't build his temple haphazardly. Every measurement was precise. Every material was chosen intentionally. The foundation was solid rock, not shifting sand. The structure was designed to last, to withstand storms, to remain standing through generations. This is how you must approach the reconstruction of your prosperity consciousness. You must be intentional. You must be precise. You must build on solid principle, not on wishful thinking or temporary motivation. The foundation of Solomon's mental architecture was built on 3 unshakable pillars, and these same pillars must support your reconstruction. The first pillar is worthiness. Solomon knew, at the deepest level of his being, that he was worthy of abundance. Not because of what he'd accomplished or what he'd earned, but because of what he was, a consciousness capable of creating reality. Your worthiness isn't something you achieve. It's something you recognize. It's already there, buried beneath layers of conditioning and false beliefs. The renovation process includes excavating down to this bedrock truth. You are inherently worthy of abundance simply because you exist. The second pillar is possibility. Solomon's mental architecture was built on the belief that anything was achievable. When he decided to build the temple, it was a project beyond anything that had been attempted before. The logistics alone were staggering, but his consciousness didn't limit itself to what seemed reasonable or realistic. He thought from possibility, not from limitation. Your mental reconstruction must include this pillar. You must build neural networks that recognize possibility instead of defaulting to limitation. You must train your brain to ask, how could this work? Instead of automatically responding, that's impossible. The third pillar is responsibility. Solomon understood that he was the creator of his experience, not a victim of circumstances, not at the mercy of external forces, but the conscious architect of his reality. This pillar of responsibility is perhaps the most crucial because it shifts you from passenger to driver. As long as you believe that your financial situation is determined by the economy, your boss, your background, your education, or any external factor, you cannot build sustainable prosperity. You're building on shifting sand. But when you accept complete responsibility for your financial reality, when you recognize that your consciousness is the primary creative force in your life, you've laid a foundation that can support unlimited abundance. Now, here's where the real work begins. Knowing these principles intellectually is like having the blueprint for a magnificent building. But the building doesn't exist until you actually do the construction work. You must actively dismantle the old neural networks that support scarcity and actively build new ones that support abundance. This happens through a process neuroscientists call self-directed neuroplasticity. You literally take control of your brain's evolution by consciously choosing what you think about, what you focus on, and most importantly, what you feel. Every evening, Solomon would sit in meditation, but this wasn't passive relaxation. He was actively constructing neural architecture. He would bring to mind his vision of prosperity, not as something distant or unattainable, but as a present reality. He would feel the emotions of abundance coursing through his body. He would imagine walking through his future temple, touching the walls, feeling the weight of responsibility and joy that came with such magnificent creation. And his brain, unable to distinguish between actual experience and vividly imagined experience, would fire the same neural networks, release the same chemicals, and strengthen the same pathways as if the experience were real. He was literally building the neural architecture of abundance before the physical abundance manifested. Research in neuroscience confirms what Solomon practiced thousands of years ago. When you repeatedly imagine and emotionally connect with a desired future experience, you're not just daydreaming. You're installing new hardware in your brain. The neurons that fire together wire together. The more you activate a particular neural network, the stronger it becomes. Eventually, this new network becomes the automatic program, the default operating system. Your brain literally reorganizes itself around the new architecture you're building. But here's the challenge that stops most people. The old architecture doesn't disappear overnight. In fact, the old neural networks will fight for survival. They'll generate thoughts and emotions designed to pull you back to familiar patterns. You'll start feeling abundant, and suddenly an old fear will surface. You'll begin thinking from possibility, and a limiting belief will interrupt. This is normal. This is your old architecture resisting demolition. The key is to not engage with these old patterns, not to fight them, but simply to redirect your focus back to building the new structure. Every time you choose the new thought, the new feeling, the new perspective, you're adding another brick to your new mental temple. Let me tell you what happened with Diana after she began this reconstruction work. For 3 months, she practiced daily. Every evening before sleep, she would enter a meditative state and actively build new neural architecture. She would feel what it was like to be a sought-after designer who commanded premium rates. She would imagine clients approaching her, respecting her expertise, happily paying her true worth. She would practice thinking thoughts like, "I am exceptionally valuable," and "My work transforms businesses and deserves exceptional compensation." At first, these thoughts felt foreign, almost uncomfortable. Her old architecture would protest, generating anxiety and doubt. But Diana persisted. She understood that she was literally rebuilding her brain. After 3 months of consistent practice, something shifted. The new architecture had become strong enough to support different actions. She raised her rates by 300%. She repositioned her services to target larger corporations. And within 6 months, her income had tripled. Not because the market changed, not because she suddenly got lucky, but because her mental architecture could finally support the level of abundance that had always been available. This is the work Solomon did before laying the first stone of his temple. This is the work you must do before your external circumstances can permanently change. You must build the inner temple first. You must create mental architecture strong enough, solid enough, magnificent enough to contain the abundance you desire. And you must understand that this isn't one-time work. Just as physical buildings require maintenance, your mental architecture requires consistent attention. Solomon didn't build his temple and then abandon it. He maintained it, protected it, ensured it remained a fitting container for something sacred. Your consciousness is sacred. Your capacity to create abundance is sacred. The mental architecture you're building is the temple that houses your creative power. Every thought you think is either reinforcing old structures of limitation or building new structures of possibility. Every emotion you feel is either weakening your foundation or strengthening it. Every choice you make is either renovating your consciousness toward abundance or allowing it to collapse back into scarcity. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, as your brain waves slow and your subconscious becomes receptive, you have an opportunity to continue building your inner temple. You don't need to force anything. You don't need to struggle. Simply allow yourself to imagine the mental architecture of abundance. Feel what it would be like to live in a consciousness where prosperity is natural, where abundance is expected, where wealth flows easily because the internal structure is built to receive it. Feel the solid foundation of worthiness beneath you. Feel the strong pillars of possibility and responsibility supporting your vision. Feel the spaciousness of a mind no longer constrained by limiting beliefs. You're not just dreaming, you're building. You're creating neural pathways. You're laying the foundation for a mental temple that will house abundance beyond anything your old architecture could have contained. Stone by stone, thought by thought, feeling by feeling, you're constructing something magnificent. And just like Solomon's temple became a wonder of the ancient world, your reconstructed consciousness will become a source of unlimited prosperity, not just for you, but for everyone who encounters the abundance that radiates from the temple you're building within. Chapter 4. Proverbs of Prosperity. Programming the subconscious with ancient truths. Words are not just sounds that convey meaning. They are creative forces that shape reality. Every word you speak, every sentence you think, every internal dialogue you engage in is literally programming your subconscious mind and instructing your nervous system on how to perceive and interact with the world. Solomon understood this principle with such clarity that he spent years crafting specific sequences of words designed to reprogram consciousness. We call them proverbs. He called them keys to the kingdom. These weren't just wise sayings meant to inspire or educate. They were precisely constructed linguistic formulas designed to bypass the conscious mind and install new operating instructions directly into the subconscious. Think about the power of a single sentence, repeated at the right time, in the right state of consciousness. Your subconscious mind doesn't argue. It doesn't question. It doesn't evaluate whether something is true or false, good or bad, possible or impossible. It simply accepts what it's told repeatedly, especially when those instructions come wrapped in emotion and delivered in moments of high receptivity. Solomon knew that if you could craft the right words and embed them deeply enough into someone's subconscious, you could literally change the trajectory of their entire life. This is exactly what he did for himself, and this is exactly what you can do starting tonight. The most famous of Solomon's proverbs, the ones that have survived thousands of years, all share common characteristics. They're short, memorable, and they bypass logical resistance by presenting truth in paradoxical or metaphorical ways. The generous soul will be made rich, and he who waters will also be watered himself. Notice the structure. It's not a hope or a wish. It's a declaration of how reality operates. It's programming language for the subconscious. When you hear this repeatedly, when you absorb it in a receptive state, your subconscious begins to reorganize your perceptions and behaviors around this truth. You start noticing opportunities to be generous. You start feeling the connection between giving and receiving. Your nervous system begins to relax around scarcity because it's been programmed with an instruction that says, abundance flows through generosity. But here's what most people miss. You cannot program your subconscious with words you don't believe at a deep emotional level. You can repeat affirmations until you're exhausted, but if underneath those words is a feeling of desperation, if your body is contracted in fear, If your heart doesn't believe what your mouth is saying, you're actually reinforcing the opposite program. This is why so many people fail with affirmations and positive thinking. They're speaking prosperity while feeling poverty. They're declaring abundance while vibrating at the frequency of lack. The words alone are not enough. The words must be united with feeling, with emotion, with a physiological state that matches the instruction you're trying to install. Solomon's genius was understanding that the subconscious mind is programmed most effectively in specific states of consciousness. He would rise before dawn in that liminal space between sleep and waking, when the brain is naturally in alpha or theta wave pattern. In these states, the analytical mind is quiet, the critical faculty is offline, and the subconscious is wide open to new programming. He would speak his carefully crafted proverbs aloud, not as empty recitations, but as declarations infused with feeling, with certainty, with the full conviction of someone who knows these words are describing reality itself. Let me share what happened to a man named Robert, who discovered the power of intentional linguistic programming. Robert was a sales professional who had plateaued at a frustrating income level. He worked hard, knew his product, had excellent relationships with clients, but something invisible seemed to prevent him from breaking through to the next level. During a conversation, he casually mentioned a phrase he'd been saying to himself for years. "I'm doing okay, but I'll never be one of those top earners. That's just not who I am." When I pointed out that this sentence was literally a command he was giving his subconscious, a program he was running every single day, he was shocked. He'd never considered that his casual self-talk was actually creating his reality. Robert decided to replace that limiting program with a Solomonic proverb of his own creation. "I am a magnet for extraordinary success, and my value expands with every conversation." He didn't just say it, he practiced it in a specific way. Every morning for 15 minutes he would sit quietly, slow his breathing, and enter a meditative state. Once he felt relaxed and receptive, once he'd moved from beta to alpha brain waves, he would repeat this proverb slowly, allowing each word to sink in, generating the feeling of being a magnet, feeling his value expanding, experiencing the emotion of success as if it were already his reality. He did this for 30 days consistently. By day 12, he noticed something remarkable. In sales conversations, he felt different, more confident, more certain of his value, more magnetic. He wasn't trying to be these things. He had become them because his subconscious had accepted the new programming. Within 60 days, he'd closed 3 major deals that elevated him into the top tier of his company. The same person, the same skills, the same market, but entirely different results, because he'd changed the program running in his subconscious. This is the power Solomon harnessed with his proverbs. He wasn't just collecting wisdom, he was creating transformation tools, linguistic codes, that could unlock prosperity consciousness in anyone willing to use them correctly. And the beautiful thing is, you don't need Solomon's exact words. You need to understand his method. You need to craft your own proverbs, your own prosperity declarations that speak directly to your unique limitations and possibilities. These declarations must be personal, must feel true in your body, must excite something in you when you speak them. Here's how you create effective prosperity proverbs based on Solomon's template. First, identify the specific limiting belief that's blocking your abundance. Be ruthlessly honest. What do you actually believe about money? About your capacity to create wealth? About your worthiness to receive abundance? Write it down. Look at it. Recognize that it's just a program, not a truth. Then create a counter statement, a new program that directly opposes the limitation. But here's the critical part. This new statement must be structured in a way that your subconscious can accept. If your current reality is poverty, and you try to program yourself with, "I am a billionaire," your subconscious will reject it as false. The gap is too large. You need bridge statements, proverbs that are believable enough to bypass resistance, but powerful enough to create change. For example, if your limiting belief is, "I never have enough money," a bridge proverb might be, "Money flows to me in expected and unexpected ways, and I am learning to receive with gratitude." Notice the structure. It acknowledges movement. It includes possibility. It doesn't make claims your subconscious will reject. As you program this statement in, as you repeat it in receptive states with genuine feeling, your brain begins looking for evidence that supports it. And once you start noticing small confirmations, once you start experiencing even minor unexpected income, your subconscious accepts the program as true, and then you can advance to stronger declarations. Solomon had proverbs for every aspect of prosperity. He had declarations about wealth creation, about wise decisions, about the nature of abundance, about the relationship between giving and receiving. But all of them followed the same principle. They were designed to reprogram the subconscious with truth that the conscious mind might resist. Where there is no vision, the people perish. This proverb is a program about the necessity of future focus. It's telling your subconscious that without a clear mental picture of your desired future, you cannot thrive. When you absorb this deeply, your brain begins to prioritize vision. It starts demanding clarity about where you're going. It becomes uncomfortable with aimless drifting. The proverb has installed a new operating instruction. Now let's talk about the other side of linguistic programming, the destructive power of words you speak against yourself. Your subconscious is always listening. It hears every criticism you level at yourself, every declaration of limitation, every statement of impossibility. And it takes all of these as instruction. When you say, "I'm terrible with money," you're programming poverty. When you say, "I can never get ahead," you're creating stagnation. When you say, "Rich people are greedy," you're ensuring you'll never become wealthy, because your subconscious will protect you from becoming something you've labeled as negative. These casual statements, these throwaway comments, they're not harmless. They're programming code being written into your operating system in real time. I want you to become aware of your linguistic patterns around money. For the next few days, notice what you say about finances, about your capability, about your worth, about wealthy people, about money itself. Don't judge yourself. Just observe. You'll be shocked at how many limiting programs you're running on automatic. These programs didn't appear overnight. They were installed gradually, usually absorbed from parents, culture, early experiences. They've been strengthened through repetition until they became the invisible assumptions that govern your financial reality. But here's the good news. What was programmed in can be programmed out. What was learned can be unlearned. What was installed can be replaced. Solomon spent years creating proverbs and decades programming them into his consciousness. But we have an advantage Solomon didn't have. We understand neuroplasticity. We know exactly how the brain changes. We can use this knowledge to accelerate the reprogramming process. You don't need years. You need consistency, and you need emotion. The combination of repetition and elevated emotion is the fastest way to install new neural programs. When you repeat your prosperity proverbs in a state of gratitude, joy, or excitement, you're releasing the chemical signals that tell your brain, "This is important. Install this permanently." You're literally instructing your neurons to wire together in new patterns that support abundance instead of lack. Let me give you a specific practice Solomon used that you can implement tonight. Before sleep, in that drowsy state where your brain is naturally slipping into theta, speak 3 prosperity proverbs aloud. These should be your personally crafted declarations, statements that counter your specific limitations and affirm your new identity as a prosperous being. Speak them slowly. Feel each word. Don't rush. Let the meaning sink into your body. Notice the physical sensation each statement creates. This is crucial. Your body must feel the truth of what you're declaring. If you feel nothing, if there's no emotional resonance, the programming won't install. But if you can generate even a small feeling of hope, of possibility, of excitement as you speak these proverbs, you're creating the chemical cocktail that facilitates neurological change. Here's what will happen if you practice this consistently. At first, the proverbs will feel awkward, maybe even false. Your old programming will resist. You might feel silly or doubtful. This is normal. You're introducing new code into a system that's been running old programs for decades. But if you persist, if you continue declaring your prosperity proverbs every night in that receptive state before sleep, something shifts around the 2-week mark. The new programs start to feel more natural. The old resistance weakens. By 30 days, you'll notice that your automatic thoughts have changed. The inner dialogue that once reinforced limitation now defaults to possibility. By 60 days, you'll realize you're making different choices, noticing different opportunities, experiencing different results. Not because you tried harder, because you reprogrammed the operating system that determines what you perceive and how you respond. There's a woman named Angela who used this exact process to transform her relationship with money. Angela had been raised in poverty, with a mother who constantly said, "We can't afford that," and "money doesn't grow on trees." These phrases had become Angela's internal soundtrack. At age 42, despite having a good education and decent job, she was still living paycheck to paycheck, constantly anxious about finances. When she learned about linguistic programming, she identified her core limiting proverb, "There's never enough." She crafted a counter proverb, "Abundance is my natural state, and I always have more than enough." Every night for 90 days, she programmed this declaration into her subconscious. She would say it aloud in the darkness of her bedroom, feeling the words, imagining abundance, generating gratitude for resources she didn't yet see. The shift started internally. She noticed she stopped using phrases like, "I can't afford it," and started saying, "How can I afford this?" or "This isn't a priority right now." The linguistic shift reflected a consciousness shift. Within 6 months, her income had increased by 40% through a promotion she hadn't even applied for, and she'd started a side business that was generating additional revenue. The external changes followed the internal reprogramming. This is the secret Solomon left, encoded in his proverbs. He understood that consciousness creates reality, and language shapes consciousness. He knew that if you could change the words running in someone's mind, you could change their entire life experience. He crafted proverbs that bypassed resistance, installed truth directly into the subconscious, and transformed how people perceived and interacted with abundance. These weren't just nice sayings. They were transformation technology disguised as wisdom literature. You have access to this same technology right now. You can craft your own proverbs, your own linguistic programs, specifically designed to reprogram your unique limitations. You can speak them into your subconscious during those receptive states, when your brain is ready to accept new instruction. You can, with consistency and emotion, completely rewrite the code that's been determining your financial reality. But you must start. You must actually do this work, not just understand it intellectually. Solomon didn't just know about proverbs. He lived them. He breathed them. He programmed them so deeply into his consciousness that they became his automatic operating system. His thoughts, his decisions, his actions, all flowed from these deeply embedded programs of prosperity. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, you have an opportunity to begin your own reprogramming. You don't need complicated techniques. You need clarity about what limiting programs you're running, intention to install new programs, and commitment to repeat your prosperity proverbs consistently in receptive states. Your subconscious is waiting. It's ready to accept new instructions. It doesn't care whether you program it for poverty or prosperity. It simply executes whatever code you install, most consistently and emotionally. Solomon programmed himself for unprecedented wealth. He used words as tools to reshape his consciousness, and his external reality had no choice but to match the internal programs he was running. You have the same capability, the same brain, the same subconscious, the same creative power. All you need are the right words, spoken at the right time, in the right state, with the right emotion. Start tonight. Choose your prosperity proverbs. Speak them into the receptive darkness. Feel them installing in your neural architecture, and trust that your subconscious is listening, accepting, and preparing to create a reality that matches these new programs. Word by word, proverb by proverb, you're reprogramming yourself for prosperity. And just as Solomon's carefully crafted declarations transformed him into the wealthiest man of his age, your prosperity proverbs will transform you into the abundant being you were always meant to become. Chapter 5. Wisdom Before Gold. Why consciousness is the true currency. Here's the paradox that most people never understand. Solomon didn't attract wealth because he was wise. He was wealthy because he understood that wisdom is wealth. Not metaphorically, not philosophically, literally. Wisdom, which is simply expanded consciousness, is the actual substance from which all material wealth is formed. When you grasp this principle, when you truly understand that consciousness is the primary currency of the universe, everything changes. You stop chasing money and start cultivating the consciousness that creates money effortlessly, endlessly, inevitably. Think about every wealthy person you know or have studied. Go beyond the surface story of their success. Look deeper. What did they all possess before they possessed wealth? They had a level of consciousness, a way of perceiving reality, a capacity to see possibilities that others couldn't see. They had wisdom, not necessarily book knowledge or formal education, but an expanded awareness that allowed them to recognize opportunities, make connections, solve problems, and create value in ways that generated abundant financial reward. The money was never the primary thing. The money was always a secondary effect, a natural consequence of their level of consciousness. This is what Solomon understood in that pivotal moment when he asked for wisdom instead of riches. He wasn't being noble or self-sacrificing. He was being brilliant. He was recognizing the hierarchy of creation. He was understanding that if you have consciousness, you can create anything. But if you have things without the consciousness that created them, you'll lose those things as quickly as they came. Consciousness is the cause. Wealth is the effect. Get the cause right, and the effect is guaranteed. But if you chase the effect while ignoring the cause, you'll be chasing forever. Let me explain what consciousness actually is, because most people use the word without truly understanding. Consciousness is your capacity to be aware. It's your ability to perceive, to process information, to recognize patterns, to make meaning, to imagine possibilities. And here's the critical insight. Consciousness exists on a spectrum. Some people operate with very narrow, contracted consciousness. They see only problems, only limitations, only what's directly in front of them. Other people operate with expanded consciousness. They see possibilities, connections, opportunities, solutions. They perceive patterns others miss. They imagine futures others can't conceive. And this difference in consciousness creates a massive difference in results. When Solomon asked for wisdom, he was asking for expanded consciousness. He was requesting the ability to perceive reality more accurately, more completely, more dimensionally than the ordinary person. And once he received this gift, once his consciousness expanded, wealth became inevitable. Why? Because expanded consciousness sees opportunities everywhere. Expanded consciousness recognizes value before others do. Expanded consciousness makes connections that create synergy. Expanded consciousness solves problems in ways that generate resources. The wealth flows toward expanded consciousness the same way water flows downhill, naturally, effortlessly, following the path of least resistance. I want you to consider your current level of financial consciousness, not your knowledge about money, but your actual consciousness around it. How do you perceive money? Do you see it as scarce or abundant? Do you see wealth creation as difficult or natural? Do you perceive yourself as someone who struggles with finances or someone who navigates them skillfully? These perceptions, this consciousness, is determining your financial reality far more than your education, your effort, or your circumstances. Two people in identical situations can produce wildly different financial results based solely on their level of consciousness. One sees obstacles, the other sees opportunities. Same reality, different consciousness, completely different outcomes. There was a man named Thomas who demonstrated this principle beautifully. Thomas and his brother inherited their father's struggling manufacturing business. They had identical resources, identical knowledge of the business, identical starting points. Thomas's brother saw a dying industry, overwhelming competition, and impossible challenges. He sold his half of the business at a loss within 2 years. Thomas saw something different. He saw untapped markets, potential partnerships, opportunities for innovation. Same business, same circumstances, but Thomas operated from expanded consciousness. He asked different questions. Instead of, "How do I survive?" he asked, "How can I create value in new ways?" Instead of, "Why is this so hard?" he asked, "What possibility am I not seeing yet?" Within 5 years, Thomas had transformed the business into a thriving enterprise worth 10 times what his brother had sold his share for. The difference wasn't talent or luck. The difference was consciousness. This is why Solomon's request was so powerful. He understood that if you expand your consciousness, you expand your capacity to create wealth. It's not that the universe rewards wise people with money. It's that wise people, people with expanded consciousness, naturally generate wealth because they perceive and interact with reality in ways that create value. They see what others miss. They connect what others leave separate. They solve what others accept as unsolvable. And all of this creates tremendous value, which converts directly into financial abundance. Now here's where most people get stuck. They think consciousness is something you either have or don't have, something fixed and unchangeable. But neuroscience proves this is completely false. Consciousness is expandable, it's trainable, it's something you can deliberately cultivate and grow. Your consciousness right now is simply the result of the neural networks you've developed through your life experiences and habitual patterns of thought. But you can build new networks. You can literally expand your consciousness through intentional practice, and when you do, Your capacity to generate wealth expands proportionally. Solomon didn't just receive expanded consciousness as a supernatural gift. He cultivated it. He practiced it. He spent time in states of deep meditation and contemplation, where his ordinary thinking mind quieted and his awareness expanded beyond its normal boundaries. In these states, he accessed insights and wisdom that weren't available to his everyday consciousness. He saw connections between seemingly unrelated things. He perceived patterns in human behavior, in markets, in resources. He understood principles of leadership and economics that others couldn't grasp, because his consciousness was operating at a higher level of perception. You can do this same work. You can expand your consciousness systematically and watch your financial reality transform as a direct result. But you have to understand that this isn't about accumulating more information or learning more techniques. It's about actually expanding your capacity to perceive and process reality. It's about training your brain to operate in states where insight and wisdom naturally emerge. It's about quieting the noise of ordinary thinking so you can access the deeper intelligence that sees what your surface mind cannot see. Let me share what happened to a woman named Jennifer who grasped this principle at a critical moment. Jennifer was a real estate agent in a competitive market. She worked hard, knew her business, but consistently performed at an average level. She attended seminars, learned new techniques, tried different marketing strategies. Nothing created breakthrough results. Then she encountered the concept that consciousness precedes wealth. She realized she'd been trying to get better results, using the same level of consciousness that had created her current results. She needed to expand her awareness itself, not just acquire new skills. Jennifer began a daily practice of consciousness expansion. Every morning she would spend 30 minutes in meditation, but not the relaxation kind. She practiced active expansion of awareness. She would start by becoming aware of her body, then her breathing, then the sounds around her, then the space she was in, then the neighborhood, then the city, expanding her awareness outward in concentric circles. This practice trained her brain to perceive from a broader, more expanded perspective. Then she would ask questions from this expanded state. What opportunities am I not seeing? What value can I create? What connections want to be made? She wasn't thinking through these questions analytically. She was allowing answers to emerge from expanded consciousness. Within 3 months, Jennifer's business transformed. She started noticing opportunities she'd walked past before. She made connections between clients and resources that created value for everyone involved. She saw potential in properties that other agents dismissed. Her income tripled in 6 months, not because she worked harder or learned new techniques, but because her consciousness had expanded. She was perceiving and interacting with the same market from a completely different level of awareness, and that expanded awareness naturally generated expanded results. This is the secret of Solomon's wisdom. Wisdom isn't about knowing more facts. It's about perceiving reality more accurately, more completely, more dimensionally. It's about operating from expanded consciousness that sees possibilities, recognizes patterns, and understands principles that narrower consciousness cannot access. And when you operate from this level of awareness, wealth generation becomes natural. You're not trying to force money to flow to you. You're creating value from expanded perception, and money flows naturally toward value creation. Here's what happens in your brain when you practice expanding consciousness. Your default mode network, the brain system associated with self-referential thinking and mind-wandering, quiets down. Your prefrontal cortex, associated with executive function and creative thinking, activates more strongly. Your brain waves shift from beta, the frequency of ordinary thinking, into alpha and theta, frequencies associated with expanded awareness and insight. In these states, Different parts of your brain communicate more effectively with each other. You make novel connections. You see patterns you'd never noticed before. You access information and insights that seemed unavailable to your ordinary consciousness. Solomon spent significant time in these expanded states. This wasn't leisure or escape. This was work. This was how he accessed the wisdom that made him legendary. He understood that the thinking mind, as useful as it is limited. It can only recombine known information in relatively predictable ways. But expanded consciousness accesses something deeper, something more fundamental. It taps into what some call universal intelligence, collective wisdom, the quantum field of information. Whatever you call it, it's a level of knowing that transcends ordinary thinking, and it's available to anyone willing to develop the capacity to access it. The beautiful thing about this principle is that it's completely democratic. You don't need special privileges or unique gifts. You need commitment to expanding your consciousness. You need to practice states of expanded awareness regularly enough that your brain rewires itself to operate from this broader perspective. You need to trust that wisdom, real wisdom, is available to you when you quiet the noise of ordinary thinking and open to deeper perception. And you need to understand that this work, this cultivation of consciousness, is the highest value work you can do. Because everything else in your life, including your financial abundance, flows from your level of consciousness. Think about the hierarchy this way. At the bottom is action. Most people focus here. They believe success comes from doing more, working harder, taking more action. And yes, action is necessary, but action without wisdom is just busyness. Above action is knowledge. This is better. Knowledge helps you act more effectively. But knowledge alone isn't enough because you can know something intellectually without being able to apply it effectively. Above knowledge is understanding. This is deeper. Understanding means you grasp not just what to do, but why it works, how it connects to larger principles. But even understanding isn't the highest level. At the top is wisdom, which is consciousness itself. Wisdom sees the whole picture. Wisdom perceives what others miss. Wisdom makes the connections that create breakthrough. And when you operate from wisdom, from expanded consciousness, all the other levels, understanding, knowledge, and action, naturally align and optimize themselves. Solomon operated from the top of this hierarchy. He focused on consciousness, on wisdom, on expanded awareness. And from that foundation, everything else flowed naturally. His actions were wise. His knowledge was deep. His understanding was comprehensive, and his wealth was inevitable, not because he chased it, but because expanded consciousness naturally creates value, and value naturally converts to wealth in any economy, in any system, in any time period. Now here's your opportunity. Right now, in this moment, you can make Solomon's choice. You can decide to prioritize consciousness expansion over technique acquisition. You can commit to cultivating wisdom over chasing money. You can choose to spend time expanding your awareness, training your brain to operate from broader, deeper, more dimensional perception. And when you do this consistently, when you make consciousness cultivation your primary practice, you'll discover what Solomon discovered. Wealth isn't something you pursue. It's something that pursues you once your consciousness expands enough to naturally generate value. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, practice this simple consciousness expansion exercise. Lie comfortably and bring your awareness to your breathing. Just notice the breath, nothing more. Then expand your awareness to include your entire body. Feel all of it at once, not part by part, but as a unified field of sensation. Then expand further to include the space around you, the room, the sounds, the darkness. Keep expanding, imagining your awareness growing to include your home, your neighborhood, your city, wider and wider, until you're holding the entire planet in your awareness. This isn't visualization. This is actual expansion of your perceptual field. Your brain is learning to operate from a broader perspective. Then, from this expanded state, ask one simple question. What wisdom wants to emerge? Don't think about it. Don't try to figure it out. Just ask, and remain open, receptive, aware. You may receive insights immediately, or they may come in the following days as sudden knowing, unexpected connections, or solutions that appear seemingly out of nowhere. This is wisdom arising from expanded consciousness. This is the currency Solomon traded. This is the source of all wealth, and it's available to you right now, not as a distant goal, but as a present capacity waiting to be developed. Expand your consciousness tonight and watch as your wealth begins to expand in direct proportion. Because consciousness is the true currency, and you're learning to become infinitely rich in the only thing that truly matters. Chapter 6. The Impossible Judgment. Making decisions aligned with prosperity. There's a moment in Solomon's story that reveals everything you need to know about prosperity consciousness. 2 women came before him, both claiming to be the mother of the same infant. No witnesses, no evidence, just 2 conflicting claims and 1 baby. Most rulers would have dismissed the case as impossible to judge, or made an arbitrary decision, or consulted advisors endlessly. Solomon did something that seemed completely irrational. He ordered the baby to be cut in half, each woman receiving 1 piece. The true mother immediately cried out, begging him to give the child to the other woman rather than harm it. The false mother agreed to the division, and in that moment, Solomon knew exactly who the real mother was. This wasn't just clever problem-solving. This was a demonstration of how consciousness aligned with truth makes decisions that seem impossible to ordinary awareness. Solomon accessed a level of knowing that transcended logic, evidence, and conventional reasoning. He perceived the situation from a dimension that revealed what was hidden to surface perception. And this is exactly how you must learn to make decisions about money, opportunities, investments, and prosperity, not from the limited perspective of your analytical mind, but from the expanded awareness that sees what your ordinary thinking cannot access. Every decision you make is either moving you toward abundance or toward scarcity. Every single choice, from the smallest to the largest, is a vote for the reality you're creating. Most people make decisions from fear, from limitation, from the conditioned patterns of their past. They choose safety over possibility. They choose the known over the potential. They choose what their wounded inner child believes is secure, rather than what their expanded consciousness knows is possible. And these fear-based decisions, accumulated over days and years and decades, create a life of limitation regardless of how hard they work or how much they want abundance. Solomon made decisions from a completely different operating system. His choices came from wisdom, from expanded consciousness, from alignment with universal principles rather than from fear or social conditioning. When he chose to ask for wisdom instead of wealth, that was a decision aligned with prosperity consciousness. When he chose to build the temple, when he chose his alliances, when he chose how to structure his kingdom, every decision flowed from a deeper knowing rather than from surface-level thinking. And this is the skill you must develop if you want to create lasting abundance. You must learn to make decisions from your highest consciousness, not from your programmed fears. Here's what happens in most people's decision-making process. An opportunity appears. Immediately, your past experiences activate. Your survival brain starts scanning for threats. Your conditioned beliefs about what's possible for someone like you begin filtering the information. Your analytical mind starts calculating probabilities based on what's happened before. And all of this happens so fast, so automatically, that you believe you're making a rational decision when you're actually just running an old program. You're not choosing from possibility. You're choosing from memory. And memory always recreates the past, never creates the future. Let me tell you about a man named David who learned this lesson in a painful but transformative way. David was offered a business partnership that would require him to leave his stable corporate job. The opportunity was extraordinary, aligned with his deepest passions, and had tremendous financial potential. But fear kicked in immediately. His mind flooded with questions. What if it fails? What if I lose everything? What if I'm not capable? What will people think? These weren't rational assessments. They were fear programs running automatically. David turned down the opportunity and stayed in his safe, unfulfilling job. 2 years later, he watched as that same partnership became a multi-million-dollar success. The regret was crushing, but more important than the regret was the realization that he'd made his decision from fear, not from wisdom. He'd chosen from his past programming, not from his highest consciousness. When another significant opportunity appeared 3 years later, David approached the decision differently. Instead of letting his automatic fear responses determine his choice, he created space for wisdom to emerge. He spent time in meditation, moving his brain into slower wave patterns where deeper knowing could surface. He asked himself not, "What might go wrong?" but, "What is my highest wisdom telling me? What does my expanded consciousness perceive that my fear cannot see?" The answer came not as logical analysis, but as a clear knowing, a sense of rightness that transcended his fear. He took the opportunity. It required everything he had, pushed him far beyond his comfort zone, and ultimately created both financial abundance and personal fulfillment that transformed his entire life. Same person, different decision-making process, completely different outcome. This is what Solomon mastered. He had developed the capacity to access wisdom in moments of decision. He didn't just think through his options analytically. He connected with a deeper intelligence that could perceive dimensions of reality his analytical mind couldn't access. And this is a trainable skill. You can develop the ability to make decisions from expanded consciousness rather than from conditioned fear. But it requires you to understand how decision-making actually works in your nervous system and how to interrupt the automatic programs that usually run the show. When you're faced with a decision, especially one involving money or opportunity, your amygdala, the fear center of your brain, activates first. It's scanning for threat, for danger, for anything that might harm you. This is survival programming, incredibly useful when you're facing an actual physical threat, but completely counterproductive when you're making prosperity decisions. The amygdala doesn't distinguish between real danger and imagined risk. It treats the possibility of financial loss the same way it treats the possibility of being eaten by a predator. And when the amygdala is activated, your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain capable of wisdom and expanded perception, goes partially offline. You literally cannot access your highest consciousness when you're in a fear state. Solomon understood this. Before making important decisions, he would enter into a specific state of consciousness. The texts describe him rising early, spending time in prayer and meditation, seeking divine guidance. In modern terms, he was deliberately downregulating his amygdala, shifting his brain into alpha and theta wave patterns, and activating his prefrontal cortex. He was creating the neurological conditions where wisdom could emerge. He wasn't suppressing fear. He was transcending it, by elevating his consciousness to a level where fear's voice became one input among many, rather than the dominant force determining his choice. You can do this same work when you're facing a significant decision, especially one involving money, opportunities, or changes that feel risky. Your first step isn't to analyze pros and cons. Your first step is to get yourself into a state where wisdom can emerge. This means you must first calm your nervous system, breathe deeply, slow your heart rate, relax the tension in your body. You're not avoiding the decision. You're preparing your nervous system to make the decision from wisdom rather than from fear. Spend 10 minutes in meditation or quiet reflection. Let your brain waves slow. Let your analytical mind relax. Create space for something deeper to speak. Then, from this calmer, more expanded state, ask better questions. Don't ask, "What could go wrong?" That question activates fear and narrows consciousness. Instead, ask, "What is the opportunity here? What is trying to emerge? What does my highest wisdom perceive?" These questions activate different neural networks associated with possibility, creativity, and expanded perception. You're literally changing which parts of your brain are involved in the decision-making process. And different brain networks produce different decisions. Here's something crucial that most people never realize. Your intuition, that gut feeling that something is right or wrong, that's not random or mystical. It's your subconscious mind processing vast amounts of information faster than your conscious mind can track. Your subconscious has access to everything you've ever experienced, every pattern you've ever observed, every bit of information you've ever absorbed. When you quiet your thinking mind and ask your intuition what it perceives, you're accessing a form of intelligence that's far more sophisticated than logical analysis. Solomon called this wisdom. Neuroscience calls it implicit knowledge. Whatever you call it, it's real, it's accessible, and it's often more accurate than your conscious reasoning. But here's the challenge. You can only access intuition when you're not in a fear state. Fear hijacks your nervous system and makes it impossible to feel the subtle signals of intuitive knowing. This is why so many people make poor financial decisions. They're deciding from fear, which blocks access to the very intelligence that could guide them to prosperity. They override their intuition with fearful thinking, choose safety over possibility, and then wonder why abundance eludes them. They're using the wrong decision-making system entirely. Let me share what happened to a woman named Patricia who transformed her financial life by changing how she made decisions. Patricia had a pattern of choosing security over opportunity. Every time a chance for growth appeared, her fear would activate and she'd retreat to the familiar. She turned down promotions because they felt risky. She avoided investments because she might lose money. She stayed in relationships and situations long past their expiration date because leaving felt dangerous. At age 48, she looked at her life and realized that all her safe choices had created a life of limitation and quiet desperation. Her caution hadn't protected her. It had imprisoned her. Patricia learned about decision-making from expanded consciousness and committed to a new approach. For 30 days, before making any significant decision, she practiced entering a meditative state where her fear quieted and her wisdom could speak. At first, this felt awkward and uncertain. Her fear would scream that she was being irresponsible, that she needed to be more careful, that she should think through every possible negative outcome. But Patricia persisted. She would breathe, meditate, calm her nervous system, and then ask, "What does my highest wisdom know about this choice?" The answers that came weren't always comfortable, but they carried a quality of truth that her fear-based thinking never had. Within 6 months, Patricia's life transformed. She accepted a leadership role that terrified her and discovered capabilities she never knew she had. She invested in a business opportunity that her fear said was too risky and watched it generate returns that exceeded her salary. She ended a relationship that felt safe but was slowly draining her life force, and 6 months later met someone who expanded her world in ways she couldn't have imagined. Every decision made from wisdom rather than fear opened doors, created possibilities, and generated abundance. Not because she was reckless or irresponsible, but because she was finally accessing the intelligence that could perceive true opportunity versus danger, real possibility versus wishful thinking. This is the level of decision-making Solomon operated from. He didn't make choices based on what seemed safe or what other people thought was wise. He made decisions from deep knowing, from connection to wisdom that transcended ordinary perception. And you can develop this same capacity, but you must be willing to question your automatic decision-making patterns. You must be willing to create space for wisdom to emerge before you choose. You must be willing to trust that there's an intelligence within you, accessible when your fear quiets, that knows things your analytical mind cannot figure out. Here's a practice Solomon used that you can implement immediately. Tonight, before sleep, review a decision you're currently facing. Don't think about it analytically. Instead, enter a meditative state. Breathe slowly, relax your body, let your thoughts settle. Then simply hold the decision in your awareness without trying to solve it. Imagine it as a question floating in space. Don't chase answers. Don't force solutions. Just remain open, present, aware. Ask your deepest wisdom, what do I need to know about this? What am I not seeing? What is the path of highest alignment? Then release the question and drift into sleep. Your subconscious will work on it overnight, processing information, making connections, accessing wisdom. Often, you'll wake with clarity that wasn't available to your analytical mind. The key to prosperity consciousness is learning to make decisions from your highest awareness rather than your deepest fears. Solomon's impossible judgment demonstrated this perfectly. He didn't solve the case through logic or evidence. He created a situation that revealed truth through the authentic responses of the people involved. He accessed wisdom that could see beyond surface appearances into the heart of the matter. And this is available to you in every decision you face. The question isn't whether you have access to wisdom. The question is whether you're willing to create the conditions where wisdom can speak, and whether you're willing to trust it over the fearful voice of your conditioned past. Every financial decision, every opportunity assessment, every choice about how to invest your time, energy, or resources. These are all moments where you're either aligning with prosperity, consciousness, or reinforcing limitation. Solomon understood that wealth flows to those who make decisions from wisdom, from expanded awareness, from consciousness that perceives possibility rather than just analyzing probability. He knew that one decision made from true wisdom could change everything, could open doors that seemed locked, could create opportunities that appeared impossible. And he knew that 1,000 decisions made from fear would only create more of what fear always creates: limitation, scarcity, and the slow starvation of potential. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, make a commitment. Commit to bringing consciousness to your decision-making. Commit to pausing before important choices and asking for wisdom rather than defaulting to fear. Commit to trusting that you have access to intelligence far deeper than your analytical mind can comprehend. Solomon made decisions that seemed impossible to ordinary consciousness. He solved problems that appeared unsolvable. He created abundance that seemed unrealistic, not through superior intellect, not through favorable circumstances, but through alignment with wisdom, through decisions made from expanded consciousness. you have this same capacity. Every decision is an opportunity to choose from wisdom or from fear, from possibility or from limitation, from your highest consciousness or your conditioned past. Choose wisely. Choose consciously. Choose from the part of you that knows, rather than the part that fears. And watch as your decisions begin creating the abundance that wisdom always generates when given the opportunity to guide your choices. The impossible becomes possible when you decide from consciousness that perceives beyond the impossible. Into the realm of what wisdom knows is simply waiting to be chosen. Chapter 7. Strategic Alliances. The power of collaboration in manifesting wealth. Solomon never built his kingdom alone. The texts tell us about his alliance with Hiram, king of Tyre. They tell us about the Queen of Sheba, who traveled from distant lands to meet him. They tell us about trade partnerships with merchants from across the known world. But these weren't just political arrangements or business transactions. These were energetic exchanges, consciousness connections, strategic alignments that multiplied prosperity for everyone involved. Solomon understood a principle that most people struggle to grasp. Abundance is not a solitary pursuit. Wealth is not created in isolation. The universe operates on the principle of circulation, and true prosperity flows through networks of relationship, collaboration, and mutual elevation. Here's what you need to understand about the energy of money and opportunity. It doesn't move in straight lines from source to recipient. It circulates through webs of relationship, flowing along pathways of trust, value exchange, and authentic connection. When you isolate yourself, when you operate from a mindset of competition and scarcity, when you believe you must protect what you have or hoard opportunities for yourself, you literally block the flow. You become a dam in the river of abundance, and what could have flowed to you and through you gets redirected to channels that remain open. But when you operate from collaboration consciousness, when you understand that your prosperity and others' prosperity are interconnected, you become a conduit for wealth that flows in ways the isolated individual could never experience. Solomon knew this intuitively. When he needed materials for the temple, he didn't try to produce everything himself. He created an alliance with Hiram, who had access to the finest cedar and craftsmen. When he wanted to expand trade, he didn't compete with established merchant networks. He partnered with them, creating relationships where everyone benefited. When the Queen of Sheba arrived, he didn't see a rival ruler or potential threat. He saw an opportunity for exchange, for both kingdoms to elevate through connection. This consciousness of strategic collaboration was one of the fundamental keys to his unprecedented wealth accumulation. Most people have been programmed with scarcity consciousness that sees others as competition. There's only so much to go around, this programming says. So you must fight for your share. You must protect your ideas, guard your opportunities, ensure no one takes what's yours. This mentality is poison to prosperity. It contracts your energy field, narrows your perception, and signals to the universe that you believe in limitation. And the universe, being a responsive field, delivers experiences that match your signal. When you broadcast scarcity and competition, you receive circumstances that reinforce those very beliefs. When you broadcast abundance and collaboration, you attract people and opportunities that multiply your prosperity. Let me share what happened to a woman named Michelle, who discovered this principle at a pivotal moment in her career. Michelle was a successful consultant who had built her practice through hard work and expertise. But she'd hit a ceiling. She was working maximum hours, turning away clients she didn't have time for, but unable to scale beyond her personal capacity. When a colleague suggested partnering to create a larger firm, Michelle's immediate reaction was fear. What if her partner wasn't as committed? What if clients preferred the partner? What if she ended up working harder for less money? These fears were her scarcity programming talking, protecting her from the very expansion she claimed to want. Michelle sat with this decision for weeks, recognizing that her resistance came from old beliefs about needing to do everything herself, about not being able to trust others, about scarcity of clients and opportunities. She realized she was operating from competition consciousness, even though she consciously believed in abundance. The breakthrough came when she asked herself, what would Solomon do? The answer was clear. Solomon would see the partnership as an opportunity to multiply value, to reach more people, to create something larger than either person could build alone. Michelle said yes to the partnership. Within 18 months, their combined firm had quintupled revenue, served 10 times more clients, and created opportunities neither woman could have accessed individually. The collaboration didn't divide the pie. It made a completely new pie, one exponentially larger than what either could have baked alone. This is how collaboration consciousness works. When two or more people align around shared vision and mutual benefit, they create something called coherence. Their individual energies don't just add together. They amplify each other. In physics, this is called constructive interference. When waves are in phase with each other, they combine to create a wave much larger than the sum of the individual waves. The same principle applies to consciousness and energy. When people collaborate from genuine alignment, their combined creative power isn't 1 + 1 = 2. It's 1 + 1 = 10, or 100, or 1,000. The amplification is exponential, not linear. Solomon's alliances worked this way. His partnership with Hiram created wealth for both kingdoms far beyond what either could have generated independently. The materials Solomon needed flowed from Hiram's resources. The gold Solomon paid enriched Hiram's economy. Both kingdoms prospered, both rulers elevated. The exchange wasn't a zero-sum transaction where one person's gain was another's loss. It was a generative relationship where value multiplied through circulation. This is the essence of prosperity consciousness in relationship. You don't take from others. You don't compete with others. You create with others, and everyone rises together. But here's what most people don't understand about strategic alliances. They're not just practical arrangements. They're energetic agreements. When you enter into relationship with someone, whether business partnership, friendship, or any form of collaboration, you're connecting your electromagnetic fields. You're sharing information at a quantum level. You're influencing each other's consciousness, beliefs, and possibilities. This is why Solomon was so discerning about his alliances. He didn't partner with everyone. He aligned with people who operated from wisdom consciousness, who valued integrity, who understood the principle of mutual elevation. He knew that the wrong alliance could drain energy and create limitation, while the right alliance could multiply possibilities beyond imagination. Think about the relationships in your life, especially those involving money, business, or opportunity. Are they generative or depleting? Do they expand your possibilities or contract them? Do the people you're aligned with operate from abundance consciousness or scarcity mentality? These questions matter tremendously because you cannot rise beyond the collective consciousness of your closest relationships. If you surround yourself with people who think small, who believe in limitation, who see the world through the lens of scarcity and competition, their consciousness will pull yours down like gravity. But if you align with people who think expansively, who believe in possibility, who operate from abundance and collaboration, their consciousness will elevate yours, and together you'll access opportunities invisible to those operating at lower frequencies. There was a man named James who learned this lesson through painful experience. James was talented, ambitious, and had excellent business ideas, but he kept failing to create lasting success. When we examined his life, the pattern became clear. James consistently partnered with people who operated from scarcity consciousness. His business partners were always worried about money, suspicious of opportunities, protective rather than generous. His close friends complained constantly about how unfair life was, how the system was rigged, how impossible it was to get ahead. James absorbed this consciousness. Even though he consciously wanted abundance, his subconscious was marinating in scarcity energy from his closest relationships. His environment was programming limitation faster than he could reprogram possibility. James made a difficult but necessary decision. He consciously curated his relationships. He distanced himself from people who operated from scarcity and actively sought connections with individuals who embodied abundance consciousness. This wasn't about judgment or superiority. It was about energetic alignment. He joined mastermind groups with successful entrepreneurs. He cultivated friendships with people who celebrated others' success rather than resenting it. He sought mentors who operated from possibility thinking. The shift in his consciousness was remarkable. Within 6 months, surrounded by abundance-oriented people, James's entire worldview transformed. He started seeing opportunities everywhere. His ideas gained traction. His ventures succeeded. Same person, same skills, but completely different results because he changed the consciousness field he was immersed in through his relationships. Solomon understood the power of association. He surrounded himself with wise counselors, skilled advisors, and allies who shared his vision of prosperity. He didn't waste energy on relationships that drained or diminished. He invested in connections that elevated and expanded. And here's the key. He also made himself valuable to those relationships. He didn't just take. He gave generously of his wisdom, his resources, his support. He understood the law of circulation. What you give flows back to you multiplied. What you hoard stagnates and diminishes. Solomon was a master of strategic generosity, giving in ways that created value for others while opening channels for even greater abundance to flow to him. This principle of circulation is fundamental to prosperity consciousness. The universe operates on flow. Energy must move. Money must circulate. Value must be exchanged. When you give generously, strategically, and authentically, you signal to the universe that you believe in abundance. You declare through your actions that you trust there's more than enough, that you're confident in your ability to generate value, that you're not operating from fear of scarcity. And the universe responds to that signal. Opportunities open, resources flow. The very act of giving from abundance consciousness attracts more abundance. But here's the critical distinction. Strategic generosity is not the same as people-pleasing or self-sacrifice. Solomon didn't give to everyone indiscriminately. He didn't deplete himself trying to rescue or fix people. He gave strategically to those who valued what he offered, to relationships that were mutually elevating, to alliances that served the highest good of all involved. He understood that you cannot pour from an empty cup, that sustainable generosity comes from overflow, not from depletion. He took care of his own energy, resources, and well-being first, and from that fullness, he gave generously to strategic relationships. This is where many people go wrong. They confuse generosity with depletion. They give from obligation or guilt rather than from genuine overflow. They say yes to every request, every demand, every need, and wonder why they never prosper. This isn't generosity. This is energetic bankruptcy. True prosperity consciousness gives from fullness, gives strategically, gives in ways that honor both the giver and receiver. Solomon didn't impoverish himself to enrich others. He enriched himself so he could enrich others more effectively. His abundance benefited everyone in his sphere of influence, but it flowed from his own solid foundation of prosperity, not from self-sacrifice. Here's a practice for developing collaboration consciousness and strategic alliance energy. Each evening, instead of focusing on what you need or what you lack, focus on what you can offer. Ask yourself, who in my life could I support, encourage, or assist tomorrow? What value can I create for others? How can I contribute to someone else's success or well-being? This practice shifts your consciousness from taking to giving, from scarcity to abundance, from isolation to connection. And as you consistently operate from this giving consciousness, as you look for ways to create value for others, something remarkable happens. Opportunities to receive multiply. People want to help you. Resources flow toward you. You become magnetic to collaboration and partnership because you're operating at a frequency that attracts a reciprocal generosity. But don't make the mistake of giving to get. The universe reads energy, not action. If you give while secretly keeping score, while expecting specific returns, while feeling resentful if reciprocity doesn't come immediately, you're still operating from scarcity consciousness dressed up as generosity. True abundance consciousness gives because it's your nature, because you genuinely want others to prosper, because you understand that their elevation is connected to yours. You give without attachment to specific outcomes, trusting that the universe orchestrates returns in perfect timing, and often from unexpected sources. The Queen of Sheba's visit demonstrates this principle beautifully. She came to Solomon with gifts, with questions, with genuine interest in his wisdom, and Solomon received her generously, shared his knowledge freely, honored her with attention and resources. The text tells us she left blessed beyond measure, and Solomon's reputation and influence expanded throughout the known world as a result of their exchange. Both prospered, both elevated. The alliance, even though temporary, created value that rippled outward, affecting entire kingdoms. This is what happens when consciousness meets consciousness in authentic, generous, strategic connection. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, think about your relationship to collaboration and alliance. Are you operating from competition or cooperation consciousness? Do you see others as threats or as potential partners in prosperity? Are you hoarding opportunities or circulating value? These questions reveal your underlying programming about abundance and relationship, and whatever that programming is, you can change it. You can choose, starting now, to operate from collaboration consciousness. You can choose to seek win-win relationships rather than zero-sum competitions. You can choose to be generous strategically, to give from overflow, to create value for others as a pathway to your own abundance. Imagine yourself as a node in an infinite network of prosperity. Value flows to you from multiple sources, and through you to multiple destinations. You're not an isolated island trying to survive on limited resources. You're a thriving hub in a vast web of circulation where abundance flows constantly in all directions. This is how Solomon operated. This is the consciousness that created his legendary wealth. He was connected, aligned, collaborative, generous, and strategic. He understood that his prosperity and others' prosperity were not in conflict. They were interdependent, and he built his kingdom on this foundation of mutual elevation through strategic alliance. You can build your prosperity on this same foundation, not by doing it alone, not by competing and protecting, but by connecting, collaborating, and creating value that circulates through networks of authentic relationship. Let this consciousness settle into your awareness as you drift toward sleep. You are not alone in your journey to abundance. You are part of a field of infinite possibility where collaboration multiplies prosperity beyond what isolation could ever achieve. Open yourself to strategic alliances. Trust in the power of authentic connection. Give generously from your overflow. And watch as the universe delivers partnerships, relationships, and collaborations that multiply your wealth in ways you could never create alone. This is Solomon's way. This is the path of collaborative abundance, and it begins with a shift in consciousness that recognizes we rise together, or we don't rise at all. Chapter 8. The Gold of Ophir, Creating Perpetual Flows of Abundance. Solomon didn't just accumulate wealth. He created systems that generated wealth continuously, automatically, perpetually. The texts tell us about his fleet of ships that traveled to Ophir every 3 years, returning laden with gold, silver, ivory, and precious goods. These weren't one-time transactions. They were recurring flows, established channels through which abundance poured into his kingdom with reliable regularity. Solomon understood something that most people never grasp: the difference between earning money and creating wealth systems. One requires your constant effort and attention. The other works whether you're sleeping or waking, whether you're actively involved or not. One trades time for money. The other creates value that compounds and multiplies beyond your direct input. This is perhaps the most critical distinction in prosperity consciousness. Most people are trapped in the earning paradigm. They exchange their time, their energy, their effort for payment. They work, they get paid. They work more, they get paid again. There's nothing wrong with earning. It's necessary and valuable. But earning alone will never create true wealth because it's fundamentally limited by time. You have only so many hours, only so much energy, only so much personal capacity. No matter how hard you work or how high your hourly value, there's a ceiling to what you can create through direct effort alone. Solomon understood this limitation and transcended it by creating systems that generated value independent of his personal time investment. Think about those ships sailing to Ophir. Solomon wasn't personally sailing them. He wasn't loading cargo or negotiating every trade. He'd created a system: ships, crews, trade routes, partnerships, agreements. Once established, this system operated with a life of its own, generating returns again and again. While Solomon slept, the system worked. While he focused on governance or wisdom or building the temple, the ships sailed and returned with treasure. This is systems thinking. This is how wealth compounds beyond the limitations of personal effort. And this is the consciousness you must develop if you want to move from financial survival or even comfort into true abundance. Let me tell you about a woman named Rebecca who discovered this principle after years of exhausting herself. Rebecca was a talented photographer who worked constantly. She shot weddings, portraits, events, commercial projects, anything that paid. She was successful by conventional measures, earning solid income, always busy, respected in her field. But she was also exhausted, burned out, trapped on a treadmill where if she stopped working, money stopped flowing. At age 39, recovering from stress-induced illness, she realized she'd built a job, not a business. She'd created a system completely dependent on her personal time and energy. There was no leverage, no multiplication, no way to scale beyond her physical capacity. Rebecca studied how wealth actually accumulates. She examined successful photographers who earned 10 times what she did while working half the hours. The difference wasn't talent or luck. The difference was system. These photographers had created multiple income streams that didn't require their direct involvement in every transaction. They licensed their photographs through stock agencies, earning residuals every time someone used an image. They created online courses teaching photography skills, selling the same content repeatedly with no additional effort per sale. They built teams that could shoot events without the photographer's presence. They developed products, presets, templates, and resources that generated income while they slept. They'd moved from trading time for money to creating value once that paid repeatedly. Rebecca began systematically building systems. She spent 3 months creating a comprehensive online photography course. The initial investment of time was significant, but once completed, the course sold continuously with minimal maintenance. She selected her best images and submitted them to stock photography sites where they generated ongoing licensing fees. She trained and mentored other photographers, creating a network that could handle overflow work while she earned a percentage. She developed presets and editing templates that other photographers purchased. Within 18 months, Rebecca's income had doubled, but more importantly, the structure had fundamentally changed. 60% of her income now came from sources that didn't require her direct time investment. She'd created her own version of Solomon's ships to Ophir, systems that sailed while she rested, worked while she played, generated while she created. This is the consciousness shift that changes everything. From earning to systemizing, from trading time to creating value that compounds. Solomon's genius wasn't just in his wisdom or his alliance. It was in his understanding that true wealth comes from establishing flows that continue regardless of your personal effort in any given moment. He didn't just work in his kingdom. He worked on his kingdom, creating structures and systems that generated prosperity automatically. And this is what you must learn to do with your finances. You must transition from being the sole generator of your income to being the architect of systems that generate income. Now here's where most people get stuck. They think building systems requires massive capital, special knowledge, or circumstances they don't have. This is fear talking, scarcity programming, trying to convince you that what's possible for others isn't possible for you. The truth is, systems thinking starts with consciousness, not with resources. It starts with asking different questions. Instead of, how do I earn more? Ask, how can I create value once that pays repeatedly? Instead of, what can I do to make money? Ask, what system can I build that generates income? These questions activate different parts of your brain, different neural networks, different possibilities. Solomon's ships to Ophir started with a decision to think systematically. He looked at trade, at resources, at opportunities, and asked, how can I create an established flow rather than individual transactions? That question led to the vision of a merchant fleet, which led to partnerships with shipbuilders and sailors, which led to trade agreements with distant lands. The system didn't appear fully formed. It was built step by step, decision by decision, investment by investment. But it started with consciousness that understood the principle. Establish flows, not just transactions. Create systems, not just earnings. Build structures that work beyond your direct involvement. Let me share what happened to a man named Kevin, who applied this principle in an unexpected way. Kevin was a corporate trainer, earning good money, conducting workshops for companies. Like Rebecca, he was trading time for money, and the model had limitations. He could only conduct so many workshops, travel to so many cities, work so many days. His income was directly tied to his physical presence. Kevin asked himself, how can I create training that happens without me? This question seemed impossible at first. His entire value proposition was his personal presence, his ability to engage audiences, his skill at facilitating transformation in real time. How could that be systematized? Kevin started small. He recorded his most popular workshop and offered it as a video program that companies could purchase and use internally. The first version was rough, imperfect, but it worked. Companies bought it. He refined it, improved it, added workbooks and implementation guides. Then he created a certification program where he trained other facilitators to deliver his content, earning royalties on programs they conducted. He developed an online platform where companies could subscribe for access to his entire library of training content. Each of these was a system, a flow that operated beyond his direct time investment. Within 3 years, Kevin's systems-based income exceeded what he'd been earning from personal appearance, and he was working a fraction of the hour. He'd created his own fleet, 205. This is available to you regardless of your current situation or profession. The question isn't whether you can create systems. The question is whether you're willing to shift your consciousness from earning to systemizing. Every field, every skill, every form of value creation has opportunities for systematization if you're willing to think creatively. Teachers can create courses. Consultants can develop frameworks and certifications. Artists can license their work. Service providers can build teams or create products. The specifics vary, but the principle remains constant. Create value once that generates returns repeatedly. Establish flows that continue regardless of your moment-to-moment involvement. But here's the critical understanding that prevents most people from successfully building systems. You cannot create sustainable systems from scarcity consciousness. If you're building systems from desperation, from the energy of, I need to escape my current situation, from fear of not having enough, those systems will either fail or create more stress than liberation. Systems built from fear carry that frequency and attract corresponding experiences. Solomon's ships to Ophir succeeded because they flowed from abundance consciousness, from wisdom, from strategic thinking, rather than desperate grasping. He wasn't trying to escape poverty. He was expanding already existing prosperity through intelligent design. This means your internal work must precede, or at least accompany, your external system building. You must cultivate the consciousness that believes in perpetual flows before you can successfully create them. You must feel abundant before abundant systems will thrive. You must trust in ongoing provision before recurring revenue becomes reliable. This isn't magical thinking. This is understanding that your consciousness determines what you can build and sustain. Systems created from aligned consciousness succeed. Systems created from misaligned consciousness struggle or collapse. Your internal frequency must match the frequency of what you're trying to create externally. Here's how Solomon prepared himself for creating perpetual abundance flows. He spent time in meditation and prayer, not asking for things but aligning his consciousness with universal principles of prosperity. He visualized continuous abundance, feeling the emotion of resources flowing reliably into his kingdom. He programmed his subconscious with the expectation of perpetual provision. He didn't just think about wealth. He embodied the consciousness of someone for whom abundance was natural, expected, automatic. This internal preparation created the energetic foundation on which his external systems could be built successfully. You can do this same preparatory work. Before you build your first system, before you create your first recurring revenue stream, spend time cultivating the consciousness that expects perpetual flows. Each night before sleep, Imagine abundance flowing to you continuously from multiple sources. Don't focus on specific mechanisms. Focus on the feeling, the knowing, the certainty that provision is constant. Feel resources arriving while you sleep, while you rest, while you're doing other things. Generate the emotion of security that comes from having systems in place that work automatically. Your subconscious doesn't distinguish between imagined and actual experience. When you consistently feel the emotions of perpetual abundance, your subconscious begins creating circumstances that match that feeling. There's a concept in systems thinking called leverage. Leverage means a small input creates a large output. Solomon's ships were leverage. The initial investment in ships, crews, and trade agreements created returns far exceeding the input. This is what you're looking for in your wealth creation. Points of leverage where your effort, time, or resources multiply rather than simply translate one to one. Every person who's created significant wealth has found leverage somewhere. Some found it in investing where money works for them. Some found it in creating products that sell repeatedly. Some found it in building businesses that operate through other people's efforts. The form varies, but the principle is constant. Leverage multiplies your capacity beyond personal limitation. Most people never find leverage because they never look for it. They're so focused on immediate earning, on exchanging time for money today, that they never invest in creating systems that would multiply their capacity tomorrow. This is scarcity thinking disguised as practicality. I can't afford to invest time in building systems because I need money now. This logic guarantees you'll always need money now. You'll be trapped in the immediate earning cycle forever. Solomon could have done the same thing. He could have focused entirely on immediate kingdom management, immediate problems, immediate revenue. Instead, he invested in building ships, establishing trade routes, creating systems that would generate wealth for years to come. That investment mentality, that willingness to build for the future rather than just consume in the present, that's prosperity consciousness. Let me ask you directly, what system could you begin building this month that would generate income 6 months or a year from now? What value could you create once that would pay repeatedly? What knowledge do you possess that could be packaged and sold? What skill could be taught to others? What product could be developed? What team could be trained? What passive income stream could be established? These aren't rhetorical questions. These are the questions that separate people who earn from people who build wealth. Your answers to these questions, and more importantly, your willingness to act on those answers, will determine whether you remain trapped in the time for money paradigm or evolve into the systems-based abundance that Solomon mastered. Here's a specific practice for developing systems consciousness. Each evening, spend 5 minutes imagining yourself receiving money from sources that don't require your direct involvement in that moment. Imagine waking up to notification of sales that happened while you slept. Imagine royalty payments arriving for value you created months ago. Imagine team members generating revenue without your direct supervision. Imagine investments growing automatically. Don't worry about the how yet. Just practice the feeling of perpetual flows, of systems working on your behalf. This practice programs your subconscious to recognize and create opportunities for systematization. It shifts your consciousness from earning to systems thinking. It prepares your nervous system to operate at the frequency of multiplied abundance. Solomon's ships returned from Ophir every 3 years, laden with treasure. 3 years of travel. 3 years of value generation from a system he'd established. While those ships sailed, Solomon was doing other things, governing, building, creating wisdom, forming alliances. The ships worked independently, generating wealth that compounded his prosperity. This is the model. This is the template. Create systems that work while you do other things. Establish flows that continue while you sleep, while you create, while you live. Build structures that multiply your capacity beyond the limitations of personal time and effort. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, make a commitment. Commit to transitioning from pure earning to system building. Commit to creating at least one flow of recurring or residual income within the next 6 months. Commit to thinking like Solomon, asking how you can establish channels of abundance that operate perpetually rather than just transactionally. This shift in consciousness, this commitment to systems thinking, this is how wealth actually accumulates. Not through harder work, but through smarter structure. Not through more effort, but through better design. Solomon knew this thousands of years ago. He built his legendary wealth on perpetual flows, on systems that generated continuously. You can do the same. The ships to Ophir are a metaphor for whatever systems you can create in your life and profession. The gold they return is the compound abundance that flows when you stop just earning and start building structures that generate wealth automatically, perpetually, beyond the limitations of your personal time and presence. Build your ships, establish your routes, create your systems, and watch as abundance flows to you with the reliability and multiplication that only well-designed systems can provide. This is Solomon's legacy to you, the understanding that true wealth comes not from working harder, but from building smarter, from creating flows that continue long after the initial effort has been invested. Your ships are waiting to be built. Your Ophir is waiting to be reached. The perpetual flows of abundance are waiting to be established. Begin tonight with consciousness. Continue tomorrow with action, and persist until your systems are sailing, returning, and filling your life with the gold of sustained and multiplying prosperity. Chapter 9. The Queen of Sheba. When your prosperity attracts more prosperity. There's a moment in Solomon's story that reveals one of the most powerful principles of wealth creation. The Queen of Sheba heard about Solomon's wisdom and prosperity from distant lands. She traveled for months across desert and mountain to witness it herself, and when she arrived, when she saw the magnificence of his kingdom, the depth of his wisdom, the abundance that surrounded him, she was overwhelmed. The texts tell us she brought him gifts of gold, spices, and precious stones in quantities never seen before. She came bearing treasure, drawn by the frequency of abundance that radiated from Solomon's consciousness. This wasn't tribute or political obligation. This was the magnetic power of prosperity, attracting more prosperity, abundance drawing more abundance, wealth calling more wealth into existence. Solomon didn't chase after the Queen of Sheba. He didn't market his wisdom to her kingdom. He didn't send ambassadors begging for her resources. He simply was. He embodied prosperity consciousness so completely that his very presence became magnetic. The frequency of abundance he emanated traveled across continents, pulling opportunity, resources, and connections toward him with inevitable force. This is the ultimate level of wealth creation, when you become so aligned with prosperity, so saturated with abundance consciousness, that wealth seeks you out rather than you seeking it. When your vibration is so clear, so powerful, so coherent, that opportunities, people, and resources are drawn into your field automatically. Most people spend their entire lives chasing wealth. They pursue opportunities, hunt for deals, scramble after chances, push and force, and struggle to make things happen. And there's a time and place for action, for effort, for movement toward goals. But there's a higher level of prosperity consciousness, where the dynamic reverses, where you become so magnetic that wealth pursues you, where your frequency is so aligned with abundance that opportunities appear without seeking, where your consciousness is so expanded that resources flow to you with the ease of water finding its level. Solomon operated at this level. The Queen of Sheba's journey demonstrates it perfectly. She came to him, bringing treasure, because the magnetic field of his prosperity consciousness pulled her across the known world. Let me tell you about a man named Richard, who discovered this principle after years of exhausting pursuit. Richard was an entrepreneur who'd built several successful businesses through sheer determination and relentless effort. He was always networking, always pitching, always chasing the next opportunity. He was successful by external measures, but internally he was depleted, exhausted by the constant need to make things happen through force of will. At a business conference, he met a woman who seemed to operate from a completely different paradigm. She wasn't working the room or pushing her agenda. She was simply present, radiant, genuinely interested in others. Yet opportunities flowed to her constantly. People approached her with proposals, partnerships, investments. Richard asked her directly, "How do you attract so much without trying?" Her answer changed his life. "I stopped chasing and started becoming. I focused on embodying prosperity consciousness so completely that my presence became magnetic." Richard didn't fully understand at first, but he was desperate enough to try something different. He stopped his frantic networking and deal chasing. He invested 6 months in internal work, in cultivating genuine abundance consciousness, in becoming rather than pursuing. He meditated daily, reprogrammed his subconscious beliefs, practiced feeling abundant regardless of circumstances, focused on giving value without attachment to immediate return. The first 3 months were uncomfortable. His mind screamed that he should be doing more, chasing harder, forcing results. But Richard persisted, trusting the principle even when it seemed counterintuitive. By month 4, something shifted. Opportunities began appearing without his effort. A former client called out of nowhere with a major project. A stranger at a coffee shop struck up a conversation that led to a lucrative partnership. An investor he'd met years ago reached out wanting to fund his next venture. Within a year, Richard's income had tripled, but more importantly, the quality of his life transformed. He was no longer pushing. He was attracting. He'd become magnetic. This is what the Queen of Sheba's visit teaches us. Solomon had cultivated prosperity consciousness so deeply, so completely, that he became a living magnet for wealth. His frequency was so clear, so powerful, that it broadcast across geographical and cultural boundaries, pulling resources toward him with magnetic inevitability. And this is available to you. Not through more effort, not through better strategies, not through endless hustling, but through becoming so aligned with abundance that your very presence attracts it. Through cultivating consciousness so prosperous that wealth has no choice but to flow in your direction. But here's what most people misunderstand about magnetic prosperity. They think it means sitting passively and waiting for the universe to deliver. This is not what Solomon did. He wasn't passive. He was powerfully active, but his action came from overflow rather than desperation, from alignment rather than forcing, from magnetic pull rather than fearful push. When the Queen of Sheba arrived, Solomon didn't hide in his palace. He received her magnificently. He shared his wisdom generously. He honored her presence fully. He engaged actively, but from a place of abundance rather than need. This is the key distinction: action from magnetic consciousness versus action from scarcity consciousness. One attracts, the other repels. Think about the energy you bring to opportunities, relationships, and situations. Are you showing up from a place of need or from a place of overflow? Are you grasping and desperate, or centered and confident? Can people feel your lack or your abundance? These questions matter tremendously because your energy precedes your words. Your frequency arrives before your pitch. Your consciousness is felt before your credentials are evaluated. If you're broadcasting desperation, no matter how polished your presentation, people will feel it and pull away. If you're broadcasting abundance, even without saying a word, people will feel drawn to you. They won't always know why. They'll just know they want to be near you, work with you, invest in you, collaborate with you. The Queen of Sheba didn't come to Solomon because he had the best marketing campaign. She came because something in his frequency called to something in her consciousness. His prosperity resonated with her own desire for wisdom and elevation. His abundance activated the abundance-seeking part of her awareness. This is how magnetic attraction works at the consciousness level. Like frequencies resonate, similar vibrations amplify each other. When you embody prosperity consciousness, you automatically attract others who are operating at or aspiring to that same frequency. You become a beacon for opportunities, resources, and connections that match your vibration. But building this level of magnetic consciousness requires something most people aren't willing to invest: time in being rather than doing. Solomon spent significant portions of his time in meditation, contemplation, wisdom cultivation. This wasn't leisure or waste. This was the most productive work he did because it established and maintained his magnetic frequency. When you're constantly in action mode, constantly doing and producing and hustling, your frequency becomes chaotic, scattered, desperate. You're broadcasting, "I need to make things happen through force," rather than "I am abundance and opportunities naturally flow to me." The irony is that by slowing down, by spending time cultivating clear prosperity consciousness, by becoming rather than just doing, you actually accelerate your wealth creation because you shift from pushing to attracting. Let me share what happened to a woman named Lisa who learned this principle through contrast. Lisa ran a coaching practice and was constantly marketing, posting on social media, reaching out to potential clients, attending networking events. She was exhausted, and her business was struggling despite all her effort. Her close friend, also a coach, seemed to work half as much yet had a thriving practice with a waiting list. Lisa asked her friend the secret. The friend said, "I spend 2 hours every morning not working on my business but being the version of me who's already successful. I meditate, visualize, feel abundant, practice gratitude, align my energy. Then when I do work, I'm magnetic. Clients come to me because they feel my energy, not because they see my marketing." Lisa tried this approach. Every morning for 90 days, she spent 2 hours cultivating abundance consciousness before doing any business activities. She meditated, practiced feeling prosperous, visualized clients seeking her out, embodied the energy of someone whose calendar was full and whose bank account was abundant. At first, it felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. She should be marketing, she thought. She should be hustling harder. But she committed to the practice. By week 6, something remarkable happened. A corporate HR director who'd attended a free workshop Lisa did months earlier called asking to bring her in for a major training contract. A colleague referred 3 high-level clients in 1 week. A podcast she'd been on months earlier suddenly went viral, bringing dozens of inquiries. Lisa's practice transformed not because her marketing improved, but because her frequency changed. She'd become magnetic. This is the secret the Queen of Sheba's visit reveals. Prosperity consciousness at a certain level becomes self-perpetuating, self-amplifying, magnetically attractive. Solomon didn't just have wealth, He was wealth. He didn't just possess wisdom, he embodied it. And that embodiment, that complete alignment with prosperity at the level of being, created a magnetic field that attracted more prosperity effortlessly. The queen didn't come to take from Solomon. She came to bask in his frequency, to learn from his consciousness, and naturally, inevitably, she brought treasure as an offering to abundance. This is how it works. When you truly embody prosperity, people want to contribute to it, participate in it, be associated with it. But here's the challenge. You cannot fake this. You cannot pretend to be abundant while feeling scarce. You cannot perform prosperity while vibrating lack. The universe reads energy, not performance. People sense frequency, not facade. Solomon's magnetism was real because his prosperity consciousness was genuine, cultivated through years of internal work, wisdom practice, and alignment with universal principles. If you want to become magnetic to wealth, you must do the internal work that creates authentic abundance consciousness. You must reprogram your subconscious, shift your beliefs, change your habitual emotional states, and genuinely become someone who expects, believes in, and naturally generates prosperity. The Queen of Sheba was also transformed by her encounter with Solomon. The texts tell us she returned to her kingdom, blessed, elevated, carrying not just material gifts, but expanded consciousness. This reveals another dimension of magnetic prosperity. When you operate from genuine abundance, your prosperity elevates everyone who encounters it. You don't just accumulate wealth. You circulate it, share it, use it to uplift others. And this generosity, this genuine care for the elevation of others, actually amplifies your magnetic field. The universe loves circulation. Energy must flow. When you hoard or grasp, you constrict the flow. When you share generously from genuine abundance, you expand the channels through which even more can flow to you. Solomon gave generously to the Queen of Sheba. He shared his wisdom freely. He honored her with resources and attention. He didn't give from obligation or to manipulate future returns. He gave from overflow, from genuine abundance, from consciousness that knew there was more than enough. And what happened? The story of his generosity spread further. His reputation expanded. His influence multiplied. More people came. More opportunities arose. His generosity didn't deplete his wealth. It amplified his magnetic field, drawing even more abundance into his experience. This is the paradox of prosperity. The more genuinely you give from abundance consciousness, the more powerfully you attract. Here's how you cultivate this magnetic prosperity consciousness starting tonight. Instead of focusing on what you want or need, focus on embodying the feeling of having already received it. Don't visualize future abundance. Feel present abundance. Don't imagine eventual success. Experience current fulfillment. Your subconscious and the quantum field both respond to present tense emotion, not future tense hoping. When you feel abundant now, regardless of external circumstances, you broadcast the frequency that attracts matching experiences. When you feel grateful for prosperity that hasn't manifested yet, you signal consciousness that expects provision, and the universe delivers experiences that match that expectation. Practice this specifically. Each evening before sleep, generate the emotion of having received a wonderful, unexpected financial blessing. Don't specify what it is. Just feel the surprise, the gratitude, the delight, the sense of being provided for in ways beyond your planning or effort. Feel how your body responds to unexpected abundance. Feel the smile on your face, the lightness in your chest, the relief in your shoulders. Your body and your subconscious don't know you're practicing. They experience the emotion as real, and that emotional state becomes your broadcast signal, your magnetic frequency. The quantum field responds by organizing circumstances that match the feeling you've been generating. You're not manipulating reality. You're aligning with it at the frequency level where creation actually occurs. The Queen of Sheba's journey took months. She crossed deserts, climbed mountains, navigated political complexities, all because she felt Solomon's magnetic call. She responded to a frequency that promised something her kingdom, despite its wealth, didn't have. Wisdom consciousness that created abundance as a natural byproduct. She wasn't just seeking gold or resources. She was seeking the consciousness that generated unlimited prosperity. And when she found it, when she experienced Solomon's frequency directly, she recognized it as the real treasure. The material gifts she brought and received were just symbols of the true exchange. Consciousness meeting consciousness, abundance recognizing abundance, prosperity magnifying prosperity through connection. This is what becomes possible when you shift from chasing to becoming, from forcing to attracting, from scarcity consciousness to magnetic prosperity. You stop running after opportunities and start drawing them to you. You stop convincing people of your value and start naturally attracting those who recognize it. You stop struggling to make things happen and start allowing the universe to deliver in ways more magnificent than you could have orchestrated through effort alone. Solomon didn't plan the Queen of Sheba's visit. He didn't strategize how to get her treasure. He simply maintained his frequency, and the universe brought her to him at the perfect time with the perfect gifts. This is magnetic prosperity in action. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, release the need to figure out how prosperity will come. Release the attachment to specific sources or methods. Instead, focus on becoming a magnet. Focus on embodying abundance so completely that your very presence becomes attractive to wealth. Feel yourself as Solomon felt, centered in wisdom, secure in provision, confident in flow, generous in spirit, magnetic in frequency. Feel opportunities seeking you out. Feel resources drawn to you. Feel the universe orchestrating circumstances on your behalf. You're not hoping or wishing. You're aligning with the magnetic principle that governs all prosperity. Like attracts like. Frequency determines experience. Consciousness creates reality. The Queen of Sheba came to Solomon because she had no choice. The magnetic field of his prosperity consciousness pulled her across the world. What will your magnetic field attract? What abundance is seeking you right now, drawn by the frequency you're cultivating? Who is traveling toward you, bringing gifts, opportunities, connections, because your prosperity consciousness has become a beacon they cannot resist? Become the magnet. Embody the frequency. Radiate abundance, and watch as the universe brings treasure to your door, drawn by the irresistible pull of consciousness aligned with prosperity itself. This is Solomon's ultimate teaching. You don't find wealth, wealth finds you. Once you become magnetic enough to draw it from across the deserts of possibility into the kingdom of your lived experience. Chapter 10. The Eternal Legacy. Prosperity that transcends time and space. Solomon's legacy didn't end when his physical life ended. Thousands of years after his death, his name is still synonymous with wisdom and wealth. His story still teaches. His principles still work. His consciousness still influences those who study his path. This is the ultimate level of prosperity, creating abundance that transcends your personal existence, building wealth that outlives your body, establishing consciousness that continues creating value long after you've left this physical plane. Solomon understood something profound that most people never grasp. True prosperity isn't measured by what you accumulate in your lifetime, but by what you become and what that becoming creates in the world long after you're gone. Most people approach wealth as something to acquire, possess, and protect. They see prosperity as a personal achievement, a private victory, something that belongs to them alone. This perspective is fundamentally limited because it's rooted in separation consciousness, in the illusion that you are separate from the universe, that your abundance is separate from universal abundance, that your prosperity is independent of the whole. Solomon operated from unity consciousness. He understood that he wasn't separate from the wealth he created. He was the consciousness through which wealth flowed into form. His prosperity wasn't something he owned. It was something he embodied, channeled, and distributed. And because he understood this, his wealth wasn't limited by his personal lifespan. The consciousness he developed, the principles he demonstrated, the wisdom he embodied, these continue creating value eternally. This is the final lesson, the ultimate teaching, the master key that unlocks infinite prosperity. You are not a person trying to get abundance. You are consciousness experiencing itself as prosperity. You are not separate from wealth. You are the awareness through which universal abundance manifests in physical form. When you truly grasp this, when you shift from "I want prosperity" to "I am prosperity," everything changes. You stop chasing what you already are. You stop seeking what you already embody. You stop trying to become what you've always been. And in that recognition, in that shift of identity, you access unlimited creative power. Let me tell you about a woman named Sarah who experienced this shift at a profound level. Sarah had worked with all the techniques, practiced all the principles, applied all the strategies. She'd reprogrammed her subconscious, changed her beliefs, built systems, cultivated magnetic consciousness, and yes, her external circumstances had improved significantly. Her income had increased, opportunities had appeared, life was objectively better, but something still felt incomplete. She was still approaching prosperity as something outside herself that she was trying to attract or create. Then, during a meditation retreat, something cracked open in her awareness. She suddenly realized, not intellectually but experientially, that she wasn't Sarah trying to create abundance. She was consciousness itself, temporarily expressing as Sarah, and abundance was her essential nature. The shift was subtle, but complete. She wasn't pursuing prosperity anymore. She was prosperity recognizing itself. The changes in Sarah's external world after this realization were dramatic, but almost secondary to the internal transformation. Within weeks, opportunities appeared that she couldn't have imagined before, not because she was doing anything different, but because her fundamental identity had shifted. She was no longer a limited self trying to access unlimited abundance. She was unlimited consciousness experiencing one particular expression of its infinite prosperity. Money flowed with unprecedented ease. Opportunities manifested with synchronistic perfection. Resources appeared exactly when needed. But more important than any external change was the internal peace, the unshakable knowing that she could never be separate from abundance, because she was the consciousness from which all abundance flows. This is what Solomon embodied. This is the ultimate prosperity consciousness. Solomon's wisdom wasn't just about being clever or knowledgeable. His wisdom was recognition of his true nature as consciousness itself. When he asked for wisdom, he was asking for recognition of what he already was beneath the surface identity of being a king, a son, a man. He was asking to remember his essential nature as infinite awareness, expressing through a temporary form. And when he received that recognition, when he woke up to what he truly was, prosperity became inevitable because he'd aligned with the source of all prosperity, consciousness itself. This is the teaching that transcends all techniques, all strategies, all methods. You are not a separate self trying to manipulate reality to get what you want. You are reality becoming aware of itself, consciousness experiencing one particular expression of infinite possibility. Prosperity is not something you create. It's something you allow by removing the blocks, the false beliefs, the limited identities that obscure your true nature. Every technique in this book, every principle we've explored, every practice you've learned, all of them are simply tools for removing what blocks your natural state of abundance. You're not building something new. You're uncovering what's always been true. But here's what makes this realization practical rather than just philosophical. When you truly embody this understanding, when you live from the recognition that you are consciousness experiencing itself as prosperity, your actions change. Your decisions shift. Your energy transforms. You stop operating from lack and limitation because you've recognized those as illusions, mental constructs that have no reality in consciousness itself. You start operating from overflow, from infinite possibility, from the recognition that abundance is your nature, not your achievement. And from this foundation, everything you do creates value, generates wealth, manifests prosperity, because you're no longer acting against your true nature. You're finally aligned with what you actually are. Solomon's greatest legacy wasn't the temple he built or the gold he accumulated. His greatest legacy was demonstrating what becomes possible when consciousness recognizes itself and operates from that recognition. He showed that one person, fully aligned with their true nature as infinite awareness, can create prosperity that transforms entire civilizations. He proved that consciousness, when it stops limiting itself with false beliefs and contracted identities, has unlimited creative power. And he left a template, a pathway, a set of principles that anyone can follow to achieve the same recognition and create the same abundance. Let me share what happened to a man named Michael, who finally understood this principle after years of seeking. Michael had achieved external success, wealth, business success, a recognition in his field, but he felt empty, disconnected, like he was playing a role rather than living authentically. He kept asking, "Is this all there is? I've achieved what I thought would make me happy, but something essential is missing." During a period of deep introspection, Michael realized what was missing wasn't another achievement or more wealth. What was missing was recognition of his true nature. He'd been so focused on becoming successful that he'd never questioned who the I was that was trying to succeed. When he turned his attention inward, when he asked, "Who am I really beneath all these roles and identities?" something profound shifted. Michael discovered he wasn't his thoughts, his achievements, his roles, or his story. He was the awareness in which all of these appeared. He was consciousness itself, temporarily expressing as Michael. And consciousness, he realized, isn't limited or lacking. It's infinite, complete, whole. All prosperity, all abundance, all wealth exists within consciousness as potential. His job wasn't to create abundance. His job was to allow it by removing the barriers his false identity had constructed. Within months of this realization, Michael's relationship with wealth transformed completely. He stopped striving and started flowing. Money came with unprecedented ease. But more importantly, he felt fulfilled, peaceful, aligned. He'd finally found what he'd been seeking all along: recognition of his true nature as infinite consciousness, temporarily expressing as a human being. This is the eternal legacy Solomon left. The possibility of remembering what you truly are beneath the surface identity. The possibility of recognizing that you're not a limited self trying to survive in a hostile universe. Your infinite consciousness experiencing one particular expression of unlimited possibility. And from that recognition, prosperity becomes natural, inevitable, effortless, because you're no longer working against your nature. You're finally aligned with what you actually are: abundance itself. But this recognition isn't just a mental concept or philosophical belief. It must become a lived experience, an embodied knowing, a constant awareness. This is what Solomon practiced daily. He didn't just intellectually believe he was connected to infinite wisdom. He practiced feeling it, experiencing it, living from it. Every morning in meditation, every moment of contemplation, every decision from wisdom rather than fear, all of these were practices of embodying his true nature rather than just believing in it. And this is what you must do. You must move this understanding from your head to your heart, from concept to experience, from belief to knowing. Here's a practice for anchoring this recognition into your lived experience. Each night before sleep, instead of identifying with your roles, your story, your circumstances, rest in pure awareness. Simply notice that you are aware. Notice that there's a consciousness reading these words, processing these ideas, experiencing this moment. That consciousness isn't your thoughts. It's what's aware of thoughts. It isn't your feelings. It's what experiences feeling. It isn't your body. It's what inhabits and animates the body. Rest in that awareness. That's what you truly are. That's the consciousness that creates all prosperity. That's the infinite awareness that's temporarily expressing as you. Feel into that vastness. Recognize that from this perspective, you're not limited or lacking. Your infinite potential temporarily taking form. And as you fall asleep from this recognition, you program your subconscious with the deepest truth. You are not a person seeking abundance. You are abundance recognizing itself. Solomon's story is your story. His journey from ordinary human consciousness to recognition of his true nature as wisdom itself. That's the journey every person must take to access unlimited prosperity. The specific circumstances differ. The external details vary. But the essential journey is identical. From identification with limited self to recognition of infinite consciousness. From believing you're separate to knowing you're whole. From thinking you need to create abundance to realizing you are abundance, experiencing itself. The eternal legacy Solomon left isn't just his wisdom or his wealth. It's the template, the pathway, the demonstration that transformation is possible, that consciousness can evolve, that any person willing to do the internal work can shift from limitation to unlimited creative power. Every principle in this book, every practice you've learned, every technique you've explored, all of them point to this ultimate realization. You already are what you're seeking. You already possess what you think you lack. You already embody the prosperity you've been pursuing. The journey isn't about becoming something new. It's about removing what obscures the truth of what you've always been. And here's the beautiful paradox. The moment you truly recognize this, the moment you experientially know yourself as consciousness, rather than as a limited self, your external circumstances begin transforming to match that recognition. Not because you're manipulating reality or using techniques effectively, but because you've finally aligned with your true nature, and your true nature is infinite, creative potential. Solomon's external wealth was simply the physical manifestation of his internal recognition. His kingdom was the outer expression of his inner kingdom, consciousness aware of itself as unlimited possibility. This is why his legacy transcends time. This is why his story still teaches thousands of years later. This is why his principles still work, regardless of economy, culture, or era. Because he wasn't teaching external techniques or situational strategies. He was demonstrating eternal principles, consciousness-level truths that remain constant, because consciousness itself is constant. The surface details of life change. Technology evolves. Economies shift. Cultures transform. But consciousness remains the same yesterday, today, and forever. And prosperity consciousness, once understood and embodied, creates abundance in any time, any place, any circumstance, because it's working with the fundamental creative force of reality itself. So what is your legacy going to be? Not just what you accumulate in this lifetime, but what consciousness you develop, what understanding you embody, what truth you recognize. Will you die still believing you're a separate self, struggling to survive in a hostile universe? Or will you awaken to your true nature as infinite consciousness, temporarily expressing through a human form? Will you spend your life chasing external abundance while missing the infinite abundance of your essential nature? Or will you recognize what Solomon recognized, that you are not seeking prosperity, you are prosperity recognizing itself? These aren't just philosophical questions. They determine everything about your experience. They determine whether you live in limitation or possibility, whether you experience scarcity or abundance, whether you feel separated or connected to infinite creative power. Solomon chose recognition over ignorance, wisdom over unconsciousness, unity over separation, and that choice changed everything. It gave him access to unlimited creative power. It allowed him to create legendary prosperity. It established a legacy that continues teaching, inspiring, and transforming lives thousands of years after his physical death. You have the same choice available right now, not tomorrow, not after you've achieved certain things or developed certain qualities. Now, in this moment, you can choose to recognize what you truly are beneath the surface identity. You can choose to shift from identification with limited self to recognition of infinite consciousness. You can choose to stop seeking what you already embody and start expressing the prosperity that's your essential nature. This choice doesn't require perfect circumstances or ideal conditions. It requires willingness to question your fundamental assumptions about who and what you are. It requires courage to release the familiar limited identity and rest in the vastness of pure awareness. It requires trust that what you truly are is infinitely more magnificent than what you've believed yourself to be. Tonight, as you drift into sleep, make this choice, not as a mental decision, but as a shift in awareness. Stop identifying with your thoughts, your story, your circumstances, your roles. Rest in the awareness that's aware of all these things. That awareness is what you truly are. That consciousness is your essential nature, and that nature is infinite abundance, unlimited creativity, boundless prosperity. You're not a person who sometimes feels abundant. You are abundance itself, temporarily experiencing what it's like to be a person. Feel into this truth. Let it sink deeper than concepts into direct experience. You are consciousness. You are awareness. You are the infinite field in which all prosperity arises. This isn't something you need to achieve or become. This is what you already are beneath the layers of false identity and limiting beliefs. Solomon's code is finally revealed. You are not seeking the secret to prosperity. You are the secret. You are not trying to discover the key to abundance. You are the key. You are not pursuing the code that unlocks wealth. You are the code itself. Consciousness recognizing its true nature as infinite creative potential. That's the ultimate prosperity principle. That's the eternal legacy. That's the wisdom that transcends time, space, and circumstance. Solomon knew this. He lived it. He demonstrated it. And he left the pathway clearly marked for anyone willing to walk it. From identification with limitation to recognition of infinity. From belief in scarcity to knowing of abundance. From pursuing prosperity to being prosperity itself. This is your inheritance. This is your birthright. This is what you truly are beneath the surface appearances, not a limited self struggling to survive, but infinite consciousness playing at being human, exploring what it's like to create prosperity from apparent limitation, discovering its own creative power by first forgetting and then remembering what it actually is. The game is almost over. The forgetting has served its purpose. Now comes the remembering. Now comes the recognition. Now comes the awakening to what you've always been. Unlimited awareness, experiencing itself as one particular expression of infinite possibility. Welcome home. Welcome to the recognition of your true nature. Welcome to prosperity consciousness, not as something you develop, but as something you remember. Welcome to abundance, not as something you attract, but as something you are. Solomon's journey is complete. Now yours begins, not by going somewhere or becoming something, but by recognizing what's always been true, by remembering what you've temporarily forgotten, by awakening to the eternal reality that you are not separate from prosperity. You are prosperity recognizing itself. You are abundance becoming aware of its own nature. You are consciousness discovering that it has never been limited, never been lacking, never been less than infinite creative potential, temporarily expressing through human form. Sleep now in this recognition. Rest in this truth. Dream from this awareness. And wake tomorrow, not as a limited self-seeking abundance, but as consciousness itself, ready to express the infinite prosperity that's your essential nature, ready to create the wealth that flows naturally from alignment with truth, ready to embody the legacy that transcends time itself. This is Solomon's final gift, the recognition that you already are everything you've been seeking. The code is cracked. The secret is revealed. The legacy is yours. You are prosperity eternal, consciousness infinite, abundance unlimited. Not someday, not after more work or better circumstances. Now, always, forever. This is who you've always been. Welcome to the kingdom. It's been waiting for you to remember you're the king.